as well to the board to take my spot, and I'm gonna leave it up to him to call a point of order for Mr. Stark over here, since I'm gonna miss doing that. I may call Kevin just to say point of order, since that was part of our typical meetings together, but a lot of people in the room tonight put up, were part of a lot of our previous meetings. It's again also a little ironic that the other Mr. Testani happens to be here this evening. And the police are here, and I want to acknowledge first Mike Perez, who he and I go back many years in both in the town of Trumbull and the town of Fairfield. And probably I think I speak on perhaps the whole board when I say that one of my more proud accomplishments was allocating the funds necessary to hire a social worker associated with the police department, and that's Jessica Brownberg, and I want to acknowledge her and her position and what she's done and will do for this town. So thank you all again very much, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to have supported the police, to have supported the fire department. I mentioned, I think in my parting remarks, every department, I think this town is very fortunate to have the department heads it has in terms of their dedication, their knowledge of the budget, and what they're able to accomplish for the town, starting, of course, with our Board of Ed. So appreciate that, and thank you all again very much. Appreciate it, Laurie. Thank you.
You have to take your name with you too, but does anyone want to say a few words?
I would if I could.
Absolutely. Go first.
Thank you. I won't take up too much time, but I thought it appropriate to come here and thank the board for your support during our social work program and all of the things that you've done for us as a police department, but most specifically the social work program. And Jack, thank you very much for all your support and pushing to get this program going, because I can't tell you enough how important it is, this social work program. Bringing Jessica here, as I don't have a plaque for you, Jack, but I bring the fruits of your labor, Jessica, to you.
Yes, yeah.
So I hope that this progress continues.
You can always give me a plaque, Mike.
I can always still get you a plaque.
I'm kidding.
But it's important, and if I could just share a few quick things about our social work program. When you as a police officer have to tell somebody that their loved one has died, one of the most heart-wrenching facts that you have to do is that particular process. And Jessica, who has, I think she has a heart in there, but sure, her heart is deep inside her soul, and she shares this with us, and she's able to take that place for us. So our role gets back to investigative services, where we need to now investigate and keep our emotions out of it. Jessica kind of takes that part. So it's important for us to have Jessica. And I've thought it most kind to say, thank you, Jessica, thank you, Jack, but thank you for the board, because really, truly, this is a good program that has brought so many things to our department, difference in nature. We've come as a strong police department, but we also come as a heart and soft police department, and we come that through the eyes of the social work program. So I can't thank you enough for that.
Thank you again. Thank you, Jack.
Have a fun meeting. I'm in political retirement.
Okay.
Thank you. Good to see you. Sure.
All right. Okay, and even though Jack did it for me, I'd also like to formally welcome Jim Myers to our board. Jim, we're happy to have you as a colleague. You get your first full meeting is a marathon, and welcome. I don't know if you want to say a few words, but.
No, I'm just happy to be here and work with all of you, and let's get started.
All right, let's get started. Okay, so we'll jump right into item 3 on the agenda, whereas the Fairfield Arts Commission has been awarded a grant in the amount of $1,000 by the State of Connecticut Office of the Arts to support the activities of the Arts Commission. Now therefore be it resolved that the first selectman be and hereby is authorized to accept said $1,000 grant, expend said funds in accordance with the terms of the grant, and execute a state and federally funded grant contract between the State of Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development and the Arts Commission, memorializing the terms of the grant. Motion to hear this item, Ms. Ruggiero, seconded by Mr. Henley. The backup for this item is posted online. It's beginning on page 1. And who's got, Mr. Becker, are you gonna take us through this one?
So this is pretty simple. Small. It just needs to go through the board because we don't have that amount appropriated, so it's not technical. I don't know if there's any specific questions on it, but you know, it's the budget that we have, there's a matching element, we use the funds we already have in the budget, is that element, so there's a large, basically only $1,000 in the budget already for this, so it needs to go through all the boards, with, you know, that's the board of selectmen, you guys and the RTM, it's $1,000,
All
but
right,
you know, more to come, but we take,
We'll take the first
whatever money
1,000.
we can get, so.
Quick item.
Yeah, I
Any
don't know
que-
much to say, it's more exciting, but.
That's fine. Any questions on this item? Okay, any comment from the public? No, okay, all in favor of approving the acceptance of the grant set forth in item 3 of the agenda, please raise your hand. Okay, it is unanimous with Mr. Curley, Mr. Matola, Mr. Henley, Mr. Myers, Mr. Jarrow, Mr. Stark, Ms. Charlton. Okay, we'll move to item 4, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Resolved to achieve the purposes of the Connecticut Deep Trail and Greenways Program and the Connecticut Greenways Council Grant for an open space trail in urbanized Fairfield neighborhood funds be and hereby are expended in the amount of up to $255,284, 80% of said funding to be made by Connecticut Deep and 20% of said funding to be matched by the Fairfield Conservation Department for a half-mile recreational trail at 150 Villa Avenue. And further resolved that First Selectman William Gerber is authorized to make, execute, and approve on behalf of the town of Fairfield any and all contracts or amendments thereof to secure said grant. Motion to hear this item, Mr. Stark, seconded by Mr. Myers. Okay, the backup for this item is posted online. It begins on page 18. Let's see, and this is, who is taking us through this one? Is that Tim? Oh, okay, Mr. Bishop, welcome.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. This grant is slightly larger than the last one. This is for the design and construction of a recreational trail, approximately a half-mile loop on town parcel, 5 town parcels, 4 of which were acquired in 2022 as part of the engineering's stormwater extension projects for the Rooster River. The 5th parcel on Algonquin was acquired by the department in 2023 with former grants coordinator Terry Brown. We acquired this this sum of money for the design and construction. The premise really was to construct and provide a better use of some recreational green space, non-athletic field related in this part of town. Pedestrian accessible through sidewalks, as well as sharing our the property with our nearby neighbors in Bridgeport, just on the other side of Stratfield Road. So the total acreage is roughly 5 acres of all 5 parcels. And as you may have heard, engineering's project will begin before this project is constructed. So there would be almost parallel projects going on in the same parcel. As I mentioned, with sidewalk accessibility further to I believe the west, towards the car wash, there's a senior center, and the part of the design and thought process was to have that pedestrian accessibility as well as build into the design, 2 spaces for handicap only vehicles, with the thought that the, wheelchair accessibility from the senior center, or anywhere for that matter, facilitate use of this trail. It was awarded this summer, and we're just here before you tonight to formalize it after approval from the Board of Selectmen this afternoon. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Any questions from the board? Mr. Stark?
Will this trail development happen before any flood containment work we do there? And then, like, would that latter work kind of undo the trail development work if it happens? This is the same site, right?
Certain aspects will be designed, certain aspects will be designed in concert with engineering's plans that's already been approved on the engineering side. So the design is gonna kind of marry nicely with what's already approved.
Thank you,
It
Mr.
hasn't
Stark.
been designed yet.
Other questions? From the board, Mr. Walsh?
Mr. Bishop, do you have a map of this?
I don't believe it's in the backup. I mean, I have a preliminary design that we used for the grant funding, but there is no design yet. So I mean, to answer your question, no, I could show you aerials of the parcels, if that's helpful, but.
Can you put it up on the screen or no?
Yeah, I could do that. Just give me 1 second. This is just while I'm pulling it up on a map. Again, Villa Avenue with Stratfield Road to the east and Algonquin Road to the north. We describe it as 150 Villa Avenue, even though it's 140, 150, and 191 Algonquin. There's those multiple parcels. So just on, it is a wetlands, which part of engineering's project will involve the wetlands enhancement. Let me see if I could share my screen here. Sorry. It's myself. There we go. Can anyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's all this undeveloped area on the northern side of Villa Avenue, which ends about roughly where my marker is. Access to Algonquin is almost directly in line with Collingwood, but the main entrance would be along Villa, and we discussed earlier. There's sidewalk access, and we'll be working with engineering for crosswalks, and public works, of course, for access from the southern side of Villa. Is this helpful, Mr. Walsh?
It definitely is helpful. How many acres is it?
It's roughly 5. And
Okay.
just to zoom out, that's, the density is pretty high here. Senior center's down here about 1,100 feet. And from the parcels to Brooklawn Avenue is about 600 feet. Also in the application, we pointed out that this section of Bridgeport's an environmental justice community. So it hit a lot of buttons, and I think would be a great addition to this part of town.
Has there ever been any other use to this property?
Not that I'm aware. I believe this was historically owned by the Archdiocese, I believe, of Bridgeport.
Yeah.
It was undeveloped, looking back to, at the time, a couple years ago, I remember looking back to the 1934 aerial, and it was still undeveloped. So to my knowledge, it's been it's remained that way.
Okay. And these funds will cover the cost to do the trails?
The design and construction, yeah, I did have engineer draft a preliminary design so we could generate costs to add, to know how much to request in the grant application. So they are accurate.
Okay, what do you think the total cost is gonna be to do this project?
I think, I think it's gonna be pretty close to what was designed. If there's any way of being more efficient in savings, then
Sure.
obviously we would.
Okay. Now, I just don't want to get into a situation where we accept a grant and then all of a sudden there's a bunch of extra money that we have to pay because we're running out of money. We got lots of projects and not enough money. And that's
Understood.
coming up every single meeting that we have. And it's becoming, a big problem. So that's why I'm asking the question, Tim. Okay,
No
thank you
problem.
very much.
I
Thank you very much. And thank you for putting up the map. It's
No,
very,
no problem. Yeah, we wanted some accurate numbers that were realistic because I have no idea going into, hey, this is a great idea. How much does it cost? Obviously, not many people know that. So you have to, we did pay a consultant to come up with preliminary figures that were accurate with some contingency. And since it was recent, I don't think we'll experience, costs that we've had from 10 years ago that are coming now, triple the price. So I think it is an accurate number.
well, that's good because we've had plenty of projects this year that have tripled in cost. So it's been, that'd be welcome. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you,
No problem.
Mr.
Thank you.
Mr. Stark.
I have two questions. One is, do you think you'll be able to use youth group labor to blaze these trails, or are you required to use union labor?
There is going to be a public participation component. So
Okay.
yeah, we will seek that assistance from scouts and other town groups in town, garden club. Well, there is a planting component in conjunction with engineering's project. So that activity will occur.
Okay, keep me in mind. I have a few kids who need to do it. Secondly, it sounds like there's no plan to put a sidewalk on the north side of Villa. I would think that's actually kind of dangerous.
That's something we had discussions with, and I know Bill Hurley's at your meeting, and it was brought up this afternoon at the Board of Selectmen meeting by a resident. So yeah, that is a discussion. Obviously, safety being paramount. That would have to be studied, and maybe Bill can opine on sidewalks.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Stark. Ms. Ruggiero?
It looks like the 255 is the total cost, 80%, which is a grant, and the 20%, about 50 grand, is what the town is picking up. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Was that in the budget?
That has not been discussed yet.
When would that be discussed?
I need to have that discussion with the administration
I'm not really
in
following.
this cycle.
Are we voting on that then? I don't understand that.
I don't know if Mr. Gerber or Mr. Becker, do you want to comment on that? Where the matching is coming from, or?
Don't actually know.
I gotta know.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to, obviously, it sounds wonderful, but if it's not in the budget. where's it
And so
coming
the
from?
matching component is 50,000.
Like 52,
Yeah.
51 and change.
You,
Can someone take the map down, please? Because I can't really see anybody anymore. Thank you. Thank you.
We haven't identified specifically where it's gonna come from.
is it Are you anticipating there's room for this in the operating budget or? are you gonna-
ARPA.
ARPA is an option.
I think a likely source
Hi.
could be the Smith Richardson
I
Fund.
was about to say, he has several funds to come, yeah, so.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bishop, you said Smith Richardson Fund?
Correct.
This would be fitting of that use, and we not use as much of it. I think we wanted to use more of it for something recently and less, so that's an option.
So if we approve this, or we accept this grant, you would have to make that determination before the project goes forward.
Correct. Yeah, you wouldn't. Yeah,
And if it comes from the Smith Richardson Fund, that has to go through the Conservation Commission and other boards as
that
well?
requires several different steps before you do it. Yeah.
Okay,
And he'll have
Board
to,
of Selectmen too.
yeah,
and he'll have to, before actually proceeding with it because of the match, we'll have to identify where the funds are gonna come from. Obviously, you can't begin the project unless you have a full appropriation, so the other piece needs to be appropriated.
Is
Mr.
there
Chair.
any contingency on when we have to use this money by in the grant or any timeframe?
June 25.
Not that I'm aware, have not been contacted by Deep yet, which I've been told is customary.
Was there any risk of accepting a grant without knowing how we're paying for the rest of it?
Sounds like you're gonna be able to come up with.
You know, passes.
It sounds wonderful. I
No.
just don't know where. I mean, we're talking about ARPA tonight, aren't we? It's on the agenda. So can we, maybe we can talk as part of that on where we can get some money? Because if this is shovel ready.
is,
There's several different funds. ARPA does have some amount marked as unallocated. There are several projects still that did not make the timeline. We're looking at December, so I caution just assuming ARPA is definitely an option. To the point about the H. Smith, there are also other accounts that have some restrictions as to how they can be used that certainly have some balances in them where this is a very fitting use for it. So I think that the point with this is it was awarded a while ago, and we are trying to, some of this stuff takes time paperwork wise, and we're trying to kind of get through the backlog and at least get that part moving, and we would have to come back to the boards. If we wanted to do the H. Smith, we'd have to come back to the boards. If we wanted ARPA, we'd have to come back to the boards.
so do we have, I'm sorry, do we have the did we get the cash or how does the process work?
No,
All right, when do we get the grant?
Allow him to accept it.
So we
we still have to accept.
So once we accept the grant, how does the process work? We accept the grant and then it gets funded, but
Most, I don't
Is
know
like-
the particulars on this one, I don't.
no, I'm just, is
Oftentimes we have-
Bill knows the answer.
You know what I mean?
The 319 is a reimbursable grant, and I think Tim can confirm that, right? It's a reimbursable grant.
Yes, that's correct. I believe this one is as well. But I'm not sure. It was, again, being at the time handled by our grants coordinator, who's no longer with us.
So that's part of the problem, yeah.
I don't have that information,
The
but I
other-
do believe it is.
So is there a time sensitivity on this where if we don't accept it, are we risking the grant somehow, or just trying to understand how it works?
I don't think so.
I guess I just don't know how we could vote on it without knowing, because we only have part of the story right now. And if there's no time frame, I mean, like I said,
You have the unallocated ARPA money that we could.
well, he
Right.
already said that we can't, it has to be shovel ready by 12/31, and Mr. Becker is saying.
Yeah, we would have to, yeah, the 50,000,
There's a
would have to be
host of other
committed by
things
then.
that we need on the schedule that we're.
Maybe we could revisit it next month. Is there a time frame where we have a certain deadline that we have to accept it by?
That's what I was asking. So is there a,
I mean, you can wait a month. I mean, there's another piece of clarification that we can get, but a lot of times on these particular grants, in kind can be utilized as well. So a lot of this is going to be done by, staff, pieces of the work that counts towards our match. So it isn't typically exactly dollar for dollar in those instances. So we can confirm that. We can certainly come back.
okay,
Our goal was to move this forward because it's been sitting kind of for several months without a grants coordinator.
understood. Well, why don't, yeah, maybe we can put it on a future agenda once we have the, is that okay? All right.
Yeah, I think William was fine.
I'd like to get more information. We're not used to having things come before us where there's no detail on the full funding of how this is gonna happen. We're talking about ARPA, we're talking about Smith Richardson Trust. We make decisions on this thing and where it's gonna come from. What I don't wanna happen is it comes out of the budget someplace on something we thought we were buying when we approved that budget. And now suddenly we can't buy because we're paying $50,000 to do this as opposed to something else, because that's not what I voted on when I went to vote to approve the budget.
Understood. But Mr. Becker, did I hear you right? So in kind meaning if we were to have DPW people work on this, their payroll counts toward this. So it doesn't have to be 50,000 out of pocket necessarily.
Yeah, we can confirm the terms, but a lot of these grants have an in-kind component, so up to a certain percentage, the manpower that's going to be utilized on these projects, no matter what.
All right. Well, why don't we move on and then we'll take it back and you know what you have to do, bring back the complete,
We'll bring
okay.
it back and.
We have a lot of
we'll at least
items
have
ahead of
the-
us.
the pathway. Yep.
All right, so we'll defer this item until we have the remaining pieces. All right, thank you, everyone. All right, so we'll move on to item 5, another grant. So whereas the town of Fairfield has been awarded a grant in the amount of $17,519.02 by the state of Connecticut, acting through its Secretary of State office for costs related to implementing and conducting early voting. And whereas the grant does not require any matching funds to be provided by the town, now therefore be it resolved that the first selectman be and hereby is authorized to accept said $17,519.02 in grant funds and execute an assistance agreement between the town and the state memorializing the terms of the grant, as well as any and all documents necessary or appropriate to carry out the terms of the grant, and be it further resolved that the Board of Selectmen hereby appropriates the amount of grant funds and authorizes the grant funds to be used for the purposes specified in the grant. Motion to hear this item, Ms. Ruggiero, seconded by Mr. Myers. Okay, so the backup for this item is posted online, begins on page 19, starts with a memo from the Secretary of State. Mr. Becker?
Yeah, so the backup and it has full on the second to last page related to this that the full 17, but it was noted in the final document, an email between registrars going to Deputy Chief of Staff, noting that any of the excess funds would be directed to the senior line, which would be covering the early voting personnel costs. So this is just additional dollars coming down to cover the early voting from Secretary of State. So trying to push some amount of support down. So it's relatively simple and the election's over. So we have a bill or we get the grant money towards it, but
We have costs to apply this grant to.
we absolutely do. There's a bunch of different smaller items and then again, access towards personnel.
All right. Questions from the board on this? Okay, any public comment? No, all right, all in favor of approving the acceptance of the grant set forth in item 5 of the agenda, please raise your hand. Okay, it is one. Okay, it is unanimous 8-0. Thank you, everyone. So we'll move on to item 6. So here, consider and adopt a bond resolution amending and restating a resolution entitled "A Resolution Appropriating $3,240,000 for the cost of certain non-recurring capital projects and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation. To increase the appropriation and bond authorization of the Southport Sidewalk Connectivity Project by $600,000 for total appropriation and bond authorization under the resolution of $3,840,000. All right, motion to hear this item. Mr. Gero, seconded by Mr. Stark. Okay, the backup for this item is posted online. The information on the Southport Sidewalk Connectivity Project begins on page 86. The resolution begins on page 89. And if you look at the resolution, this was a larger resolution with a number of projects in it. The Southport sidewalk was just a part of that. So this is amending that piece of the original resolution. Hi,
Hi.
welcome.
So town's seeking 600,000 in additional funding that would cover the contract price for this community connectivity project, as well as a 20% contingency. The amount for the low bidder from Primary Landscaping was $793,000. Scope of this project is on Route 1 between Halls Highway and Queens Avenue. This includes sidewalks, 88 curb ramps, as well as crosswalks, and as well readjusted traffic signals in that area as well. The aim is to have one connected pedestrian path in this area.
So we had heard this when we originally voted on it. So this increased funding, is this because we went out to bid and the price came up?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right. I believe this project started probably around COVID or before COVID, and then since then, our design engineers as well as DOT have gone back and forth, having to do the comments, and then by the time everything had gotten resolved, prices have gone up.
All right. Questions from the board, Ms. Ruggiero?
Where do we stand in this project right now? Is it already like midway done, 50%? Where are we at with this? Or is it not even started?
Project hasn't started yet. It's not, the designs are finished. We've actually put it out to bid. So we do have a contractor.
So if we were to go forward with this, when is this contractor preparing, or when will they start?
Contract's set to start April of 2025. We're getting to the end of the season, so having to do pouring concrete, we won't be able to do that during the
And-
winter.
And this includes the price as of that date when they start, right? There's no additional risk that it's gonna go up in the next 6 months?
Fortunately, there might be some risk that I'm not sure.
And the 20% contingency, is that on the 600,000 or is it on the 3.8 million?
It's not on the 3.8 million. It's actually on the contract price of 793.
Yeah, so just to clarify, so the 3.8 million was the amount of the entire bond resolution, which included a number of projects, including this one. So I think the original, and let me just pull it up. The original amount of this project, Bill, do you remember? Oh, here it is.
Looks like it's on the last page, 1,060,000.
Yeah, so the 1,060,000 is inclusive of the 600,000, right? So now it's 1,060,000 in total, if I got that right? No?
It's incremental, isn't it?
Because
That added to,
this adds up to 3,840,000, which is the amount of the amended bond resolution.
For 9 projects.
Right.
no, because the math is that it was 3.2 and you're adding this incremental to get to the 3.8, the
Right, so
600.
this is the revised one that adds up to 3.8.
Oh, yeah,
So
okay.
now with the 3.8, the component of the Southport project is now 1,060,000, which would presume it was previously 460, right?
Yeah, the 460 was it included the $100,000 of design, and that's why that number is higher than the number that we had given you.
Gotcha.
That includes the whole project costs, because when we went for the original bond, it was design and the construction with the grant money.
Okay, so now the whole project cost is the $1,060,000
Right, yeah, some of it's already been spent already, as I said, it's the designs.
on the design,
Right.
100,000.
Mhm.
Okay,
So it was 460 when we first saw this.
460,
So
and
it's more than doubled.
yes,
Right, and just to give you an idea on that, as Anthony had mentioned, this is Anthony Santiago, he's a senior civil engineer with engineering department. The original project, as Anthony said, was right around COVID. That's when we got the grant. There was a right-of-way issue where the state wanted to bill one or even two of the abutting property owners a lease with an unlimited cap. And so they weren't going to go for that. So we spent almost a year going back and forth. We redesigned the project to avoid having them have to get a lease. So they were very appreciative of that. Then the second year, the delay was, the state came back, and because we're shifting the traffic signals, the red lights, you see on the signal heads on the wires there, because that would affect or had a potential to affect the structure of the mast arm and the foundation. We went back and forth for almost a year on that, because if they had us replace the signal, right now a new signal is going for anywhere from about 700,000 to $1 million. So we fought on that. We finally won on that with the help of the consultant and a letter that the engineering department produced. And so we got that straightened out. Then we went out to bid. And now these are all based on the bids that we received. The good news is the contractor, we checked with the town of Weston, and they had not only just good, but rave reviews about the contractor. So that makes us feel pretty good. Whenever you're digging underground or doing something, you never know what you're gonna get. So that's why, as I mentioned before, we have a 20% contingency. If we only use 2% of that contingency, then obviously we'd be returning money back because we don't need it.
and Bill, did you say there was, this was a while ago, but there was a grant associated with this? So this is the
Yes.
full amount of the appropriation. How much is the
The
grant?
grant is 360,000. It's
Okay.
capped at that, so.
So when we originally were anticipating doing this, we thought we'd be 100,000 out of pocket.
And then maybe a little bit more. Some of as going through the things, we were around the $500,000 for the budget, the cost of the project. And then, as I said, the couple-year delay pushed it now to what, 839 or something, 793, I'm sorry, 793. So you went roughly from the engineer's estimate, somewhere in the 500,000 range to 793. Didn't quite double, but it's gone up, and that's what we're getting. Even now on another project that we had that DOT had done, it doubled, and that was even from 6 months. And that was with a consultant, that's with the state, where they do an update of the monthly cost estimates, to keep up. Sometimes you don't know, and then other projects come in under, slightly under. You just never know until you put it out to bid. One of the other things that we are seeing is that we're not getting, there was a time, I'll say in 2015 or whatever, we put a project out to bid, we'd get 8, 9 bidders. A lot of times now, and this was a state, they got 2 bidders. On this one, we got 2 bidders. So they're not, a lot of the contractors aren't bidding on it, and I think that's also pushing some of the costs up.
Okay, thank you for that, Bill.
Sure.
Mr. Giro?
Just a follow-up though. I don't know where you're getting the 793 from. I see 1,060,000.
If it should be in the backup, we did the bid documents. If you
Yeah,
wanna
so
take it over.
in the backup in the bid documents, the 793 is.
So does this 1,060,000 include the 20% contingency? Is that why it's the number that's here?
Sorry, say again?
The number is 1,060,000, we said, right?
Mhm.
So how does that tie or reconcile to the 793?
Does that include the grant? Maybe that's the answer to the question. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, it shouldn't. I mean, usually we have the gross amount of the appropriation. We don't reduce the bond resolution by the grant. I mean, this says includes actual bid price plus 20% contingency is how it's described here. That doesn't add up to $1 million.
Yeah, the bond, whoever bond counsel had wrote that, And as I said, they included the whole project cost. We didn't include the design cost because that was already spent. And that's not the construction phase that we're in
Got it.
now. But in the original bond, the way it was worded, it was design and construction.
So if we
with the
take this
grant.
1,060,000 and we subtract out the design costs that were already spent, and that gets us to 900,000.
Exactly, yes.
So then if I take the bid amount plus 20%, that gets you to a number plus
960.
design.
Plus design, get you
to
that number,
960.
correct.
And then, which is my last question, we're gonna be discussing the Safe Streets Initiative and $1 million ask for that. Why wouldn't this fall under that? Like, why do we have two asks? Because this is clearly for safe streets, isn't it? Sidewalks?
This is related to a specific grant, Safe Streets,
I'm
different.
sorry, I was asking you, if you don't mind.
I don't think you know.
Oh,
This
I
is his
just don't
first
know.
notifying.
I just don't know what the difference is, we're being asked
No,
for $1 million.
This
back.
was the community connectivity grant that was established about 3 or 4 years ago. So that's why this was way before Complete Streets. This was this was already approved. It went through all the boards. The only reason why we're coming back is as I said, we needed some additional funding for it. There's another connectivity that will, McKinley connectivity, which I believe has already been approved and gone through the board. So we were very fortunate enough to get 2 connectivity projects. Very few towns get that, so.
Thank you.
All right.
Sorry for asking so
No,
many
that's okay.
questions.
No, thank you, Bill. Other questions? Okay. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Anthony, all right. Sorry to have all these questions at your first meeting, Anthony, but welcome.
Not at all.
Welcome to the town.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to the town. All right, are there no other questions? Okay, any public comment on this item? All right, I don't see any. Okay, so we can go to a vote then. All in favor of approving the bond resolution amendment set forth in item 6, please raise your hand. Okay, it is unanimous 8-0. All right, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
All right, have a good night. Thanks again.
Good night.
All right, so we'll move to item 7, which is here consider and adopt a bond resolution entitled a resolution appropriating $5,615,565 for the costs associated with the air conditioning upgrade project at Tomlinson Middle School and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation. Motion to hear this item. Ms. Ruggiero, seconded by Mr. Myers. Okay, the backup. So the backup for the whole Board of Ed capital plan begins on page 98. The information specific to the Tomlinson project is on page 117 of the posted backup, and the bond resolution is on page 155. Welcome, Angelus. Good to see you.
Good evening. Just so we're clear, the backup or that you have in your backup for the book, there is an $83,875 difference between that and what's in your resolution tonight. The difference being that the committee for you. So that's why we updated the number to reflect their numbers. So they're very comfortable moving forward with those now. We knew there was going to be some time between meetings that there might be some adjustments, and so that is what happened.
So just to, was the 83 in the waterfall or no?
The 83 was not on the waterfall.
Okay, so it's been updated since
It's
then.
been updated now, so. So the ask today is the $5,615,565 for the Tomlinson phase 2 air conditioning. Answer any questions about it, or you have that.
Any questions from the board on this item?
I have a question.
Mr. Matola?
So Angelus, if this happens, will the building be fully air conditioned once this is done?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Thank you, Mr. Matola. Other questions from the board, Mr. Welsh?
So if approved, we're not gonna have to pay $1 more than this, right? We're done, we're done.
What's
Set
really
price,
crazy.
we can't go above this price, the contract you're signing, it's all in the contract from here on out.
It has not gone out to bid yet, so
Okay.
we're not
Oh,
officially
boy.
out to bid yet, but we are
Okay.
designed, we are designed at this point, and we have worked with our builders that are doing the phase one, the 3 schools for phase one, to come up with pricing, so they feel comfortable with this pricing at this point. There is contingencies built into that, and that is why they feel that these are comfortable numbers to move forward.
I have a question again.
Mr. Were you done, Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, why don't you take his question? I'm thinking
I
about it.
guess, Angeles, who was the, and maybe it's in the backup, I'm flipping around here. Who did the design? You hired an outside company entity to do this work?
Same company that's been doing the other 3 sites, and
Okay. Did they look at the roof did they look at the roof and the
Cobain is
fixtures
the
on the
builder.
roof and all of that?
I'm sorry,
Did they-
Myers is our owner's rep, Cobain is our builder, and I'm drawing complete blank. Thank you.
So it's the same group that's worked on the other air conditioning
The
project?
same group that's worked on the other air conditioning projects.
Okay.
Have they brought him in on budget on those other projects from the point we are today with those projects?
They have, once we came back for the additional allocation from the concept that design to the documents and going out to bid, we have been on target and on task for those.
Ms. Ruggiero?
Were these in the most recent waterfall chart that we saw?
Yeah, I think it was $85,000 less based on yes, this
Yeah.
was.
We are in the process of working to update the waterfall chart. It'll go back to the board for updates. But as this one has gone up 83, there are some reductions in other AC phases, so it will balance out. We'll see.
Thank you, Ms. Ruggiero.
Might need air conditioning in here.
I know, we need air conditioning in this room. It's
Sorry.
like 90 degrees in here.
Where our students feel.
I think they're trying to make the meeting go quicker or something by blasting us out of here with heat. Okay, other questions from the board?
So if you need, if they come back and they need another $1 million or $2 million, these are the bids that come in. You'd have to come back to us, right?
Myself or the building committee at that point will be established and added to their charge, but we will need their support of it.
And then we have the right to vote up or down that project based on where the BOE wanted to bring in other projects and other things, because it's just a concern of mine. Every time we go out to bid, we seem to be drastically under it, but I we respect the fact that we have to those questions. On budget. Yes.
Any other questions?
What was it initially?
Comment.
Mr. Matola?
I kind of agree with Mr. Walsh on this, but I think what the remedy is gonna be is that we're gonna have to readjust the waterfall chart and some other projects are gonna have to get pushed back a little bit if some of these projects continuously go over budget. I mean, once we start this thing, we're gonna have to finish it and we're gonna have to make whatever necessary adjustment is required with respect to the waterfall. So that's how I kind of look at it.
John, I think you and I kind of look at it the same way. I mean, and that's why I'm just raising the issue. So, you know,
No, I agree.
I hate getting these funding and then getting the bids because we've been so dramatically shocked by some of the numbers and we kind of are running out of runway on some of this stuff. So yes, some things, decisions would have to be made and they'd have to be made before we voted on the next, if it was additional $2 million, what's going to happen? So thank you, John.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Thank you, Lori, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matola. Mr. Penley, did you have a comment?
I was just gonna ask when the initial seed funding was approved, when did that happen? Do you know when the initial,
Last year,
last year?
the board pushed, asked us to get the seed money approved, so we did do that so that we could bring phase 2 through 5 up to the design documents, so we have better numbers moving forward.
Okay, so it's a fairly recent estimate and one that's historically they've been accurate on.
It literally came in between the Board of Finance, Board of Ed meeting and this meeting today.
Thanks.
Becker?
It was, yeah, it was in the springtime. They were trying over the summer to get the numbers, so we had the better numbers inside of the waterfall. From a timeline perspective, that was very condensed to do that type of work at that many sites. So they're off by about a month, but then the updated figure will make it into the February adjustments. But by doing that seed money, almost it was 980,000. The whole point was to be much more accurate.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? All right, any comments from the public? See any? Okay. We can take this to a vote. All in favor of approving the bond resolution set forth in item 7? Please raise your hand. Aye. Okay, it is unanimous 8-0. Thank you, Angelus. So I'm assuming you're gonna stay there. Well, we move to item 8. To hear, consider and adopt a resolution amending and restating a resolution entitled a resolution appropriating $7,255,022 for the cost of certain non-recurring capital projects and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation. To increase the appropriation and bond authorization of the NAPS Highway Tennis Basketball Court project by $409,956 for a total appropriation and bond authorization and under the resolution of $7,664,978. Motion to hear this item, Ms. Ruggiero, seconded by Mr. Henley. So the backup for this item is on page 107 online. That shows this project cost for this item increasing from $418,000 to $828,000. Again, this was a bond resolution that had other projects in it. So that was, so this particular component of that bond resolution roughly came back double. So I think I said the amended bond resolution on page 160. Angelus?
So yes, as you said, the 7 million is not for this project. The project total is gonna be 828,318. We did go out to bid, and that's the number we were able to lock in on. The original funding was 418,362. This funding was requested as seed money for this project, and during that Board of Finance meeting, it was upgraded to be the full, for what was believed that conceptually at that time to be the full project cost. Now that we've gone out to bid and we are locked in with a bidder now, we know the full total is 828,318. If you'll remember back, some of you were on the board at that point, it went back and forth for a little while because we weren't looking to bond the full amount. We were looking to get the seed money to move forwards with getting designs and accurate numbers. And it was decided the best way to move forwards was to do the full ask, even though it was a conceptual number at the time. So that's why we feared at that time that we would be back here asking for additional funds, and we are back here now asking for additional funds.
Question.
Mr. Matola?
So, whose idea was it to go for the full funding back then? Was it the Board of Finance's idea? I don't remember that.
It was not the Board of Finance's idea. It was the past CFO felt that that was the best way to write the resolution. We did not feel that, but that's the way the resolution was written.
Okay, so we knew back then that this could be a lot more than $418,000.
We knew that that was a conceptual number, and we were looking for seed money to get designs and drawings done to get lock in a better number for this project.
Was this in the waterfall? Or was it in the waterfall or for the 418, or was it more than that?
It was in the waterfall for the 418 as the placeholder until we got the seed money, and then that's when the town decided to put the full funding available out instead of just the seed money that we were requesting.
The 409 was in the latest version you saw.
Oh, you mean the updated number?
The updated
number is in the, yeah.
Oh, so the updated number's there now.
Yes, it is in the new waterfall. The updated ask is on there.
Okay, so we don't have to change anything on the waterfall now to if we approve this, it's there.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question? who does this conceptual design work for us? Are we hiring someone to do
We
that?
hire a firm to do that. For this one, we use Land Tech out of Westport. They, we did use them because of their experience and knowledge with the district. They won the bid to do the tennis courts for the Parks and Rec Department. So we were able to jump onto the bid for the Parks and Rec Department to get this one designed as well.
Okay. And I mean, I'm not trying to be critical, but it seems like every time we get a conceptual design, the actual costs turn out to be double or triple. And I'm just wondering the quality of these the reliability of the conceptual design. Sometimes I wonder why we're even paying for it.
So the conceptual design was not a paid for, the
Oh.
new design was the paid for with Land Tech. I actually unfortunately can't tell you where the conceptual number came from. It was on the waterfall when I arrived in this position.
Okay, so that
So-
the original number
Yep.
was not one that anybody
It was a
developed.
placeholder. It wasn't,
Okay.
to my knowledge, it wasn't developed by anyone, but it was a placeholder placed on there.
Okay, so and I confess, I don't remember this either, but when did we originally approve this?
It was a few years back. It was
Okay.
delayed because of some conversations with the town and with
February 7th, 2023.
Great.
January what?
February
February
7th.
February.
Okay, so
I
last
think the
year,
number was from a previous tennis court project that was done either the other side of Ward or Ludlow
okay, got it,
for that number. So it was based on actuals of a previous project.
got it. Yeah, no, I guess I had in my mind, I was thinking of one of the HVAC projects where we did pay for a conceptual design in it. It seems like that's happened not infrequently, and so I wonder how satisfied you are with the people we're hiring to do that work, because we don't seem to be getting back anything really
We tend to be-
worthwhile.
We tend to be satisfied with them. A key point to remember is conceptual design or conceptual number is just that it's a concept that they're putting a pen to paper and saying, yes, this can be done. But here's a rough number to do it. It's when you start going through the design phases and get down to the design documents where you start really locking in, like the air conditioning project has been locked in. So they usually start at a higher rate and then they kind of slope down into locking in the right numbers. We have had some history with where they've been kind of starting lower and going up, and that we're avoiding and trying to get away from contractors that do that. Because they try to sell their services, look how cheap we can do it for you. We're not looking for cheap, we're looking for accurate. So that's what we push for them.
Okay, but this one was an old placeholder that was just kind of, that was based on a previous project that we did. Okay, that's helpful. Mr. Stark?
I'm a little confused. Was the conceptual study and estimate done by somebody who's disinterested? In the sense that they're not going to be involved in the actual construction, or?
Usually conceptual architects, engineers that we bring on board, it's a low number, so it comes out of the operating budget, and they know that once we get to design phase, we have to go out to bid. So they kind of tend to be, okay, here's a number.
It's the same
It's a conceptual.
person.
Did he answer your question though? Did you get, his question is that same party doing then the more detailed design work
For this particular one?
for any project?
Again, no, it depends, because once we go into this more defined design work, we go out to bid. And then if they bid on it, they could win it, or they know that there's a chance that they would not be the lowest bidder or the confident bidder, so there's never a guarantee if they do the conceptual design that they will move through the phases with us. And they know that going into the project.
Are you just replacing the existing footprint, or are you doing something extra?
We are replacing the existing footprint of the tennis courts along with the basketball court that abuts them on the site there.
That Ward JV tennis team plays there. My son was a member. I don't care, but the students did, because visiting teams would kind of scoff at the really poor condition of the courts. The varsity courts over on the other side of the building are excellent.
Ms. Ruggiero?
Where, is this located at Ward?
Yes. There's two sites at Ward that have.
I didn't know what Naps Highway was. Like, is that what?
That's the road.
Yeah.
It's on Knapp's Road, Knapp's Highway.
Thank you. Mr. Myers?
Can you just explain, like, for something like what I would think is simple as existing an existing footprinted court? What's the need for the conceptual design? Like, what are you designing that's not already been designed? I mean, other than maybe a different application, so it lasts longer?
So this one did not have a conceptual design, as I was informed. It was, the price was used from an existing project that was going on. They carried that number as a placeholder for this project. That was a number that was.
Okay.
Where that was.
That's just
It was a while.
recollection, it was, we did a number of. We did White, we did Ludlow, we did the other tennis courts on the other side of Ward, and I think that we basically used one of those projects as the base number, and then add an escalation depending on what we thought it was going to be.
So who gave us the $800,000 number?
That is an actual bid. We went out to bid. We have designs, bids. Land Tech did the bid for us, so we do have the designs now. We're ready to go. And we got the bids back, and the contractor, as long as we can get this through all boards by the end of November, he's agreed to hold his price because he can start some of the work in this fall before the winter changes, and he'll finish when the weather gets better and he can get in there and finish the job. But he's agreed as long as he can start this fall, winter, he will hold his number.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Myers. Mr. Welch?
Are these tennis courts still used regularly?
Yes, the
Okay.
JV tennis team
Yeah,
uses
okay.
them and they use them for practice.
Are they open for the public?
The public does use them as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this item?
A lot of use. They're always busy.
Okay, right, no other questions from the board, comments from the public? See none. Okay, we can vote. All in favor of approving the bond resolution amendment set forth in item 8? And, okay, Mr. Curley, are you? Okay, thank you. It is unanimous 8-0. Thank you. All right. Stay right there, Angeles. All right, we'll move to item 9. To hear, consider, and adopt the bond resolution entitled a resolution appropriating $4,176,576 for the cost of partial roof replacement projects at McKinley Elementary School, Stratfield Elementary School, and Tomlinson Middle School, and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation. Motion to hear this item, Ms. Ruggiero, sorry, I always do that. Seconded by Mr. Stark. Okay, the backup for this item begins on page 135, and the amended bond resolution is on page 165. Angeles?
So we have 3 roof projects before you tonight. The first being McKinley Elementary School. This was a roof that was due and on the waterfall, and we actually started doing design work on it. So we're at this point ready to go with this one. This one got held off because of the issues with Osborne, so they got swapped on the waterfall. So now we're ready to move forward with McKinley. The second one, you have a Stratfield that was on the waterfall, rough condition, so we're hopeful to move forwards with that one. And the only one that got moved forwards on the waterfall is the Tomlinson roof project, and we're asking to move that one forward so it aligns with the air conditioning project, so that we're not putting new equipment on an old roof that we have to take the equipment off to replace the roof in the next couple of years. So we feel that we will get best pricing for this as long as we can get to the state for state reimbursement before the new year and get out the bid before the new, right after the new year. It should be a good bid process because of the 3 roofs. We don't usually do that. We usually do 1 or 2 max at a time. But because the companies will be mobilizing for 3, so we're hoping to get really good bid price.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Mr. Walsh?
Can you talk about the age of these projects? And I guess what I'm really most concerned with is like Stratfield. Did we do the roof at Stratfield when we did the
We did.
major rehab?
We did. That's why all of these are partial roof replacements. They're not full replacements. Most of our buildings, I shouldn't say all, have sections of roofs that are different ages and different warranties.
Okay.
Makes it very confusing to follow our warranty process, but we do have multiple warranties on multiple roofs. So a building like Stratfield has, I believe, 3 different warranties on it. So depending on what section of the roof is how old it is, which is how long the warranty is. I don't know if we included the aerial view, but if you'd like, I can provide those to you. That's
Well,
latest.
what year is the rehab done at Stratfield?
I don't know off the top of my head. 2009,
Stratfield?
rehab?
2009, 2007.
Okay, so when that was done, how many parts of the three section roof were done?
I can not answer that for you, but I can get that for you.
Okay. So are you saying that the part we're gonna do is not done, not from
Not from
2009, 2010?
No, the parts that we're looking at are at the end of their warranty, and most of the warranties were 15, max 20. Now we're getting 20 to 25-year warranties on them.
Okay. That's all I have for right now.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Mr. Stark?
McKinney is 20 years old now, right?
Yep.
So you're on a 20-year cycle?
For that one, that one had a 20-year life, and it's starting to show signs of wear and.
That makes me feel
That's
old.
why we were- Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Stark. Other questions from the board? So I have a question. Oh, go ahead. Mr. Bureau.
These recent numbers were included in the capital plan that we just looked at?
So my question is, how the costs were developed. So I see what's written here. We base the cost on the actual cost of recent similar roof replacement projects.
Correct.
And from what you said, did you assume some kind of, how did you factor in the impact of doing 3 at a time and?
We did factor that in, but we didn't weigh highly on it. We use our typical, we use our contingencies that we normally use for a project like this, and we also use escalation based on from the day we have the cost analysis to the year it would actually be done through. So we have elevated those prices to meet today's standard. We are hopeful that we will get really good pricing, but as we heard earlier, when we used to get 5, 6 bids, we're getting 2, sometimes 3 now. So the bidding process has really slowed down with who's out there able to do such a project and bid on it. So
Can you just talk a little more about how you actually came up with the number? So it's a partial roof. So how did you?
we take the square footage of the replacement and we do a calculation based on what the average cost to replace a roof, a commercial roof of that type with the PPM, the rubber membrane. So the type of roof we have, the square footage of the roof that we're replacing, and then we work with an architect who gives us what he's seeing as out there as industry standards right now for the square foot price. And that's how we come up with it. And then we add our contingency to it. And then we add our escalation if it's not going to be that year, the following year. So we elevate it out 6% per year. So if this number was originally put onto the waterfall in 23, it would have been escalated out to 25.
So okay, that's helpful. So we didn't actually just use the actual cost of recent similar roof replacement projects that we did. We got advice from an architect on current.
So we use, because we just did North Stratfield.
Yeah.
And apologize, I'm trying, and Holland Hill. So we use those numbers, but we also work with architects to say, what are you seeing? This is what we saw in our bid practice. What are you seeing? So we compare and take those numbers to kind of marry them together to get the best.
And what's the relationship like the last roof that we did?
Was right in line with what they're seeing now.
So we haven't seen any cost escalation in the market over the past year or two, you're saying?
Not with the roofs right now, knock on wood, because they've been fairly flat with roofs. Insulation during COVID was a big problem and big cost, but that seems to have gone down now. And we actually were very lucky to get our roofs out during COVID to bid. And we were able to use a manufacturer who thought ahead and pre-ordered insulation for roofs. So we were able to get the price prior to COVID.
And how much contingency? It's in here. I thought I saw it, but. Maybe I did.
Yeah, on that second page, the back, but it's broken out per site.
10%.
10% per, I know your bond resolution is a total of all three.
And that contingency is there just for potential price escalation, right?
Potential price escalation, unforeseen issues that could happen. Sometimes when they replace a roof, you find a drain pocket that needs to be replaced also that wasn't in the original plan. You know, a lot of them we do at this point replace as needed, and we write in the contingency with our bid to replace them rather than having them come back for contingency money.
Thank you. Other questions from the board? Anyone? Okay. Comments from the public? See none. Okay, we can go to a vote. All in favor of approving the bond resolution set forth in item 9, please raise your hand. All right, it is unanimous 8-0. All right, thank you. Okay, so we will move to item 10. To hear, consider, and adopt a bond resolution entitled a resolution appropriating $1 million for initial costs to conduct a school district building evaluation and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation. Motion to hear this item, Mr. Penley, seconded by Ms. Ruggiero. Thank you. Mr. Testani, welcome.
Thank you. Be here. So, as you're all aware, we had a robust conversation at the capital plan workshop about upcoming school building projects. There were several questions that were provided by the Board of Finance here that we will receive document tomorrow with responses to those questions. However, it seemed like there were many unanswered and unanswerable questions in regards to how we came up with certain numbers and priority of projects and so on and so forth. So we had a robust discussion at a special board meeting last week. Charlton, thank you for participating, as well as Mr. Matola, for Selectwoman Gerber and Selectwoman Vitale attended. And in that discussion with the Board of Education, the ask originally was for seed money for the Dwight project, $3.4 million. And because of the questions regarding what path to take in regards to how to do the project, out of the discussion, it was determined that we appropriate a certain number of dollars, as it was determined ultimately of $1 million, to look into several different options as to how we can accomplish a new or renovated building at Dwight, as well as incorporate preschool classes across the district. So this is going to help answer using consulting firm, an architect and engineering firm, to get a lot of the questions in detail responded to in a manner that will give the town and the Board of Education a path forward in deciding which projects and which pathway. I think that sums it up in the best way possible, but I'm very hopeful that this $1 million is more than enough to get many different scenarios looked at so that we can ultimately land on funding a project that we can get Dwight community in a better place. As you all toured the building, there's no doubt that we need to do something at the Dwight campus for the children and the community up there. I think ultimately, my personal opinion is, after we look at all the costs and all the potential risks and just our feasibility studies with Silver Petroselli and Associates, I think ultimately we will probably get and confirm a lot of things that we do know about what we can do and what we can't do up at Dwight. But let's confirm those and let's move forward so we can make an educated decision.
Thank you,
No
Mr.
questions? We can
Oh,
move
no.
on with the vote.
I'm sure there'll be questions. I don't want to put Mr. Gerber on the spot, but you, during the Board of Education special meeting. I think that the discussion around seed money morphed or moved in this direction based on, largely based on your input about wanting to better understand all the options. I don't know, do you want to speak to that a little bit? And
Can I speak instead, or should I stand up?
whichever you're comfortable with. I think the mic picks you up there, right?
Michael Pickman, yeah.
I'm not sure if you're visible on the screen, so if you
Okay.
want to come up.
Sorry, Mike. Yeah, so my concern was the 3.4 million seed money was really directed to study one option, which was building a new Dwight elementary school on the field at the upper level of where the fields are, plus an ECC of I think 13,500 square feet. And that we still had questions whether or not the cost, the costs that have been put forward, we have to understand. I understand from Angeles and Mike Pistani that very, very high level, they weren't able to do a lot of work, but it was 65 million before reimbursement. So it's a huge project, one of the bigger projects we've ever looked at. And I felt that we need to check off a lot of boxes before we move forward with a project of that size, including determine with a little bit more accuracy what the risks are on that site, something that you talk about quite often, Mr. Walsh, been through this many times, that we should be starting with some schematics and borings to get a better handle on what that site, what building on that site entails. Also, the other study that was done by Silver Patricelli was for a renovate is new, plus a 9,000 square foot addition in order to make the school sort of compliant with their current needs. And so that would entail site work off the current footprint for that 9,000 square feet, that we'd have to do some work on that property as well, or adjoining property. And in order to really understand what difficulties we would have, building there. We also have a septic system there. The leaching fields, we've been told, are probably not in good shape. And we need to understand the difference in fixing that or rebuilding that and connecting the system to, in the case of the renovation, they need to connect to the 9,000 square foot addition. In the case of the new built elementary school plus ECC, they would have to go up the hill and connect to a new school. They've said, yeah, that's probably a good thing to be up on the hill. The gravity will help bring it down, but I think we need to get a little more, because that sounds like it could be quite expensive. We need to understand how much each version of that costs. At the same time, and I know this is simplifying things, but we got this very high level preliminary number on these two options. One was the elementary school plus an ECC, and that was around 65 million gross. And we have the renovate is new plus 9,000 square feet, and that was about 20 million cheaper gross. So you need to really, in order to compare the net numbers, you would need to better understand the reimbursement rates. And there's been some back and forth about whether or not you could make the case that you actually can't renovate as new effectively, so that we should be able to get the renovate as new reimbursement rate by building the new building. And we would need to, I think, get a better handle on whether that's true. That would be the difference between, I believe, 21% reimbursement and 26 point something percent reimbursement. So the dollars are pretty big. So at the same time, so this is a 5-classroom ECC. We also have Mona Terrace, which, we've done work on Mona Terrace. I guess the Board of Ed took a look at it in 2002. But it really was looking at renovating the whole building and bringing it up to current FEMA standards. So you would have to raise the building or flood-proof the building. It was just kind of, I believe, potentially a different scenario altogether. So I think it is worth looking at that site and seeing whether there's a possibly big difference between these two approaches at Dwight, whether or not we should look at an ECC, long-term ECC at Mona Terrace. We also have this building on the Giant Steps property, and we should know whether or not we could keep that building and renovate that as an ECC. So as we were talking about this, I think something that you brought up was the current plan for the ECC at Dwight is 5 classrooms, but it kind of is shown on the waterfall as 5 classrooms at Jennings on a 2nd floor. We are not, I don't think I'm terribly comfortable with whether that will actually happen, but it seems to be an integral part of the plan to have another site. So we ought to get a little better handle on whether that's actually going to happen, because if we need 10 ECC classrooms and we only have room for 5 somewhere, we should figure out where we think we're going to put the other 5. And maybe they could be put on the same site as the, maybe we could have 10 classrooms on one site. So I just feel, and what I was told earlier today, that really the big remaining piece of Jennings isn't the structural issues or the parking issues, it's really the traffic study. So they probably should get the traffic study done, just so we know whether Jennings is really viable. And having said that, if it's not viable, there was some discussion about whether or not Osborne Hill School or Riverfield could each have additional 5 classrooms. So these are the things I think we need to check off before we make a decision of this magnitude. And I think that due diligence really needs to be done. And I think this will help out a lot, being able to hire a firm to help us walk through that and get us, comfortable in whatever decision we end up making. So.
Thank you, Mr. Gerber. I'm sure there are questions. Board, Mr. Penley.
So my question is relates to the backup, and I've spoken to you about this, spoken to some people about this. My concern is that we have $1 million here that's going from what was at one point a fairly specific request from what the Board of Ed presented to us.
Yeah.
They came up with a plan. We had, we wanted to see more details, and I agree that we should do a little more due diligence. But I'm worried that the way that this is written, and I know that this came together quickly, is actually going from a more narrow scope to something broader. And I mean, I don't want to. I actually let's get into all of it. Actually,
forget it. Finish.
Well, so for example, a lot of what you're doing is actually essentially relating to what they would have asked for in the Dwight seed money. I mean,
in one location, the new school, the new site. They were not asking for any work on these.
Right, and I from watching the last meeting, what I took, it seemed to be that the representative from Silver Petroselli, he believed, and I guess communicated to the facilities committee that the cost of renovating would and when you start opening up finding stuff would be more expensive. So it made more sense, and I think that's why they went the direction of, okay, let's build a new school. Then you have an opportunity, I guess, to build an ECC. And for me, that was my big question. Well, why is the ECC there? So I'm really glad that you're considering other ECC options. I don't see the ECC as being tethered to Dwight. And I just want to be sure that with this money, maybe there's a way we could commit a certain amount specifically to going through the Dwight due diligence? Is, I mean, I don't know if that's,
So I could have interrupted you, because that, I left that out. I think that is the fundamental, that's where we start, is on the Dwight site, on those two sites at Dwight. But the other, the way we can structure the RFP would be all the other sites are sort of an ad alternate that would happen at the same time. But those things have to get done, and we'd like them all to be done within a relatively short period of time.
yeah, well, I think I'm on board with that idea. If there can be I'm gonna really kind of lean on the history of other people on this board, but perhaps even modifying the language in this, or modifying the terms of the motion. I just think we've had some numbers thrown out from Silver Petroselli, what they would need to do up concession pools designs. One of the concerns I have is this committee that's formed to do it. I don't get who's running it. I don't know who has the money. Is it the Board of Ed? Is it the town?
No, this is not really a Board of Ed.
Is it the town?
This is because I think the Board of Ed has already voted on what they want, and this is sort of the town and the Board of Finance, like, getting comfortable. And I think it should be led by us, but I wouldn't send something out without the Board of Ed, like, reading it over and making sure that everything that needs to get looked at is covered.
The last thing, and I don't know if this is really even to you, Bill, just a general comment that I've mentioned to you, so I'll say it again here, is that I do think there's a middle ground between going out and looking at every single facility and being cognizant of the work that the Board of Ed actually did, because I think they've been sort of maligned for the last few weeks. Oh, you guys didn't do anything. And that's not the case. They don't have numbers on everything. They haven't been able to quantify everything, but there are sites that they've looked at that there was discussion about, well, for example, why aren't we going to put it at Osborne Hill? Why aren't we going to put it at Riverfield? I gather the town properties were never really on their radar. So I guess what I'm saying, and maybe it's just sort of food for thought, if we could get to some specificity in what we're doing here, I think this is more of like a broad outline here, and it could be more specific. And I know that it came together in a very short period of time, but so that's my thought on this.
So the scope that, and I hear what you're saying, like, we're not trying to look at every possibility, even ones that, may have, the
The
scope
ones
that
you
you.
talked about are the ones I've
this-
mentioned, so I
okay.
think it's,
Two at Dwight, Giant Steps, Mona Terrace, Riverfield, Osborne Hill, and a traffic study at Jennings, which is in your backup, is under this $1 million.
right.
So that's not looking at every site. That's
No,
just.
but there is this, first of all, I prefer, like, I don't know, I think we're gonna get some feedback as we go through the process. We were hoping for flexibility because we have not done that work yet to sit down and determine as a group, like, everything that needs to be in that RFP.
I think you definitely need flexibility. I think but again, what the problem with too much flexibility is that it comes back and someone here or someone on the Board of Ed has more questions. And in that meeting that everybody, or you and John attended, and the Board of Ed was there, one of the points was that, let me pick on Mona Terrace, for example. It's not just a question of, okay, we're going to build a school. It's also, okay, well, we got to have a cafeteria there. We have to there's other costs. And I wonder if having a charge for some of those specific things that we've all said we want quantified would be more helpful. And again, I really am not trying to kick the dust up, and I really do respect the history that everyone has on this board. So if this doesn't make sense, I'm sure you'll tell me, but I'm just wondering.
One of the issues is that we're under some time constraint to get this, if we want to get this bonded. So what you're describing, I wouldn't mind, spending a lot of time going through this process with their colleagues on different boards. I'm not sure that that would meet their needs in terms of timing, but anyway.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. We really need to get moving on what we can do at the Dwight site. So whether we build a new school with an ECC, a new school without an ECC, or renovate with the addition, I think we need to dive into that immediately, and then we can do all the ancillary
I'm certainly in favor of that being the first,
Yes, that's-
and
that's the
really
first.
allocating specific money for that item.
And I don't see that eating up the $1 million.
Ms. Charlton, I got a comment.
Yep, okay. Once, are you done, Mr. Penley?
Yeah, I've spoken
Okay.
enough.
All right, thank you. No, and you brought up some good points. I had some more comments, but Mr. Matola?
Yeah, you did bring up some good points. My concern is there's a $20 million difference from Silver Petroselli from renovating the current location of Dwight School and putting that addition on and building a new Dwight with the ECC attached to it. That is a ton of money. And there's absolutely no doubt that we have to do something with Dwight. We all went up there and looked at it. Quite frankly, I don't know why this hasn't come before us 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, Dwight has to be renovated. It's a mess. My concern is if we don't do all this work, we're not going to get answers to our questions. First of all, my concern is if you did the seed money for Dwight as the board proposed it, that we start doing some of that work at the upper level and find out that there are issues up there, which would delay the Dwight project if that happens. So I think this is money well worth spent to answer our questions. You know, I don't know if Oldfield's an option. I know, and Mr. Walsh, you've been around a long time on Oldfield, and we go back many years there. You know, we might be able to do something up there, but I don't know. And we should get answers to those questions because, as Mr. Gerber pointed out, you're talking about a $20 million difference between the plans right now. So this is us doing our due diligence. Let's take the time to do it right. You know, I wish we kind of did something like this 25 years ago when we ended up building 2 middle schools right next to each other. And we all regret that. I don't care what anybody says. We hear this every year, parents of school children getting bussed across town because we have 2 middle schools a half a mile next to each other. So this is a huge opportunity to get answers to many questions and get numbers and make the right decision. In the same time, giving the Board of Ed what it needs. I 100% agree that the Board of Ed needs the space. They need to expand the ECC. They need space for that. We need to fix Dwight. So I think this is, again, money well spent, and we have to move forward. Because my fear is if we don't, and we went with the plan that the board wants to do right now, we could find issues up at that site, and it would delay everything. So that's how I feel about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matola. Ms. Ruggiero?
I really like the idea of going through and doing this analysis. I didn't know about the meeting last week. I'm sure it was probably
It was a Board
noticed,
of Ed meeting,
but,
yeah.
I didn't pay attention to that. But I think it sounds like a good option. Is $1 million the right number? Do we think that will cover what we need to do?
Yeah, I think we're pretty confident that it's sufficient. Might be a little too much according to what we were told, but I think just having options, because as we all know, Mr. Walsh brings it up all the time. Get one number and it doubles. So.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Myers?
Has a firm been decided upon in terms of who's gonna do this project?
I'd like to put it out to bid and.
Okay.
Put it on the open
This-
market.
okay. I wasn't sure if you already got somebody in mind and they gave you an idea of how much it would cost.
No, we did the feasibility studies with Dwight, with the renovation as new and the new building with the ECC with Silver Petroselli, but I think it would be great to just open it up and bring another set of eyes in here and see where that leads us. We're still waiting on what their estimation would be with just a Dwight without an ECC up on the field as brand new as well. So we do have that option. But I will caution everyone, it is a big price tag in the difference initially. I think we have a high probability of getting the higher reimbursement, which will bring that number down. We start opening the walls and everything at Dwight, we know that's gonna escalate. And it's not only about the costs, I think it's also about the feasibility, if it's even going to be possible to transport 250 kids to other schools. We already have a difficult time running buses just as we are today. I'm not sure if it would be feasible for the bus company to be able to transport those children to other locations, given whatever plan we're able to put together. And as we were talking prior to the meeting, portables would be astronomical. It would eat up all of that money anyway, so. I think there may be an escalated cost between whatever options there are. We may not have really much of a choice in the end, based on if it's feasible to actually transport kids to school from the Dwight community somewhere else.
Can I just ask a follow-up, just in terms of the difference between what this $1 million is gonna accomplish and what that original seed money for 3.4, is this a subset, is this, with that, what's not happening, I guess, or what's the difference between what's happening here
They're
versus?
gonna investigate the land, they're gonna investigate the building, and they're gonna give us a better idea of what the scope of work is really gonna entail, and if there's any complexities to building on the property or renovating that we're not seeing just in a feasibility study.
I would just add, the intersection between the two it's important, but it's pretty small. Like it's the schematics and borings and you know, stuff like that on the one site versus schematics and borings on another site, and all of the inspection of the other building.
Yeah.
Can I just, and maybe I misunderstood Silver Petroselli's comments, and I know Mr. Crowley has a question, but what I thought I heard during the meeting was that the schematic design was, so if we had the whole amount of seed money, we'd get the full design done, we'd be ready to go out to bid on the one site, on the one option, right? But the schematic design portion was a subset of what that seed money would do. I think he said it was like 15% or so of the work. But that would be enough work to answer a lot of these unknowns, because at that Board of Education meeting, you know, it's really easy to go down a rabbit hole on this stuff. What about this? What about that? We don't know what's going to happen if we open the walls. We don't know what's going to happen if we dig there, what the septic tank is. The whole point of this is to start putting some numbers next to all of those risks. And quite frankly, I have no idea if that 65 million means anything. I mean, the assumptions that Silver Petroselli used for those two reports, the 65 million, the renovate is new and the build is new. He threw enough caveats in those numbers to drive a truck through.
$1 per square foot.
Yeah, it's like, it could be 85 million, it could be 55 million, I have no idea. The way that he set that up, we should have no confidence in making decisions based on those numbers. So in my opinion, going further than what's Silver Petroselli, not going all the way, but going further would give, I think, everybody much more confidence to see what these different costs are and help make decisions. And it also gives the opportunity to say, okay, let's say there was an enormous difference between renovate as new and build a new school. Then you have to say, okay, that differential now needs to be applied toward dealing or building the ECC capacity somewhere else. So how much of that savings do we start eating up, et cetera? So, you know, to me, I think, I don't know how this board's questions that we submitted could be answered without doing this analysis, because we don't have the means to quantify these risks and the numbers. So
We'll get the responses and be able to sift through them and give them whatever credibility, but they will be better answered once we get this work done. A lot of them are just, I mean, is it possible? As I think he made the great statement, what's possible and what's reasonable.
Right.
So I think
anything's possible with enough money.
Correct. So is it reasonable? And I think this will put the i's and the dots on a lot of your questions that we as lay people could not provide.
Thank you. Mr. Curley?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And a lot of what I've been thinking about on this particular topic has been addressed, but I did want to touch back on a few points. First off, I agree with what was stated at the beginning of the meeting or on this topic, in that I think the wording on this is pretty vague, and that actually was a concern of mine as well. But I did I did take some comfort in I think that I heard 7 different items were listed that were going to be addressed. I think that was Miss Jacobson who might have said that from the side chairs not on camera. But I think knowing that this is a project that it's a hybrid project that crosses over between the Board of Ed and the town, and we heard the first selectman say that this is, we're talking about town properties here too. One of my concerns is who's actually going to manage the spend of this $1 million, and who's going to coordinate it, and who's going to prioritize those 7 items on the list that were identified as where the money would be spent and addressed as alternative options.
You wanna-
You want to comment?
It might be helpful, and I'm sorry to make you get up, but I don't think the public can see you on the screen if you're over there, so.
So it's gonna fall, the proposals fall under the town side. On the town side, that'd be overseen primarily by me and my group, which would be the capital projects. So we'll involve a construction project manager. Also, it'll involve the capital projects and operations manager. And then we also have our financial Sabrina. So she'll be a part of that for the finance piece. And then we are going to coordinate also with central office. So that would involve group on operations, construction manager, and then also obviously the superintendent, the first selectman if needed. So we certainly envision that if necessary, coming back to the boards for either guidance or updates along the way. But it would be more town driven, but we would be partnering with central office and putting staff and then the consultants together to pick this up and run with it, at a steady.
Okay. All right, that's helpful, Mr. Becker. And so the town's got the lead, but it's going to liaise with the school district. Okay. And I know time is of the essence here too. We talked about going out to bid for this. What's the timing to actually get this? When will it go out to bid? How long would it take for bids to be received, and when would the work actually start to get going?
We have, we're looking within the next few weeks to push. What's that?
About 20 days.
Well, 20 days for the RFP, right? And then we can do it short and, so we're looking 20-30 early December, called first, second week. You probably have it decided by the second week. You keep the windows wide. About 20 days out and around 10 days for it to be posted, and then we can schedule it so as soon as it comes in, we can get a review and make a decision within about a week and issue it out. So that's mid-December.
Okay, and then the work gets started in earnest. Okay, that's helpful. I'm glad to know that the process would move relatively quickly. My concern is that if this is going to be handled on the town side with personnel resource constraints and the budget season looming, this is one more thing on your plate, Mr. Becker, and that concerns me.
So yeah, and I just addressed that. So on my end, and I know I've said it a couple of times when trying to get sort of use this phrase staff, and I don't necessarily have to be directly at every single one of the meetings. That will largely, running point on a day-to-day basis will be Eli in his role running capital projects. And we have been in the process of finally, it was a long time, trying to hire in the market, but we do have new project managers onboarded. We have one with quite a bit of depth on the construction side. So we have some depth that is not necessarily. We're starting to finally fix some of the staffing shortages and the vacancies on that end, and those individuals are not directly tied to the budget on a day-to-day basis. So I'm not not to say that isn't a concern and certainly my own time, but I mean,
Right.
Eli several times has said, even recently he's talking about schedules on this. We have it, David, like we can do some of that, free up some of my time, so.
And so once the firm is selected, the process starts, call it the first of the year, 2025 ballpark, right? And how long will it take them to get through this list of 7 tasks to evaluate and provide something for the town and the Board of Ed to consider? Because I'm guessing that comes back to us in late spring, May timeframe.
Some of the earlier pieces we're envisioning, that timeline, certainly Dwight, we want them to, they can go a couple different tracks and they can prioritize certain pieces of it that we believe one way or another are where we're gonna land for some portions of the project. So Dwight being, time is of the essence part, that's realistic. If some other elements of it to make some of the decisions may take a little bit longer, we're gonna kind of put them in multiple paths at the same time. I also wanted to say, just that's the RFP and doing their work on the consulting side, but there's a lot of legwork that goes, ahead of that. And so the idea is to start meeting, have that group on a regular basis, getting staff working on that so that we're teed up better for the consultants once chosen, and that'll just continue to let them hit the ground running faster.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curley. Other questions from the board? Mr. Walsh.
I don't know who's presenting, but how many students is the proposed school, just the elementary school, proposed to be built for?
Well, it's kind of a trick question in some ways. So we have about
I didn't mean it to be a trick question.
So we have about 250 students currently enrolled at White.
226 as of our last meeting.
It's about 248.
Okay, somebody said from the Board of Ed that it was 226. I wrote it down.
Okay.
At our last meeting, that was the official number, was 226.
It might have been just enrollment projections, but they changed, kids, new kids enroll.
All right, we need,
Okay, so
we need to start getting accurate numbers on this stuff. So when we have meetings, I think all numbers are gonna come, I would like all numbers to come from Mr. Testani.
Okay.
All official numbers. So I'd like to know how many students are there today.
So today is 248, you said? Just checking.
Projection was 228. And we're slightly higher, we're almost 240.
Okay, and I also, if you can, I don't need this answer today.
Yep.
I want to know what that number was on the first day of school. How many kids were enrolled at that school on the very first day of classes?
Okay.
Okay.
So, and I
And I would
say,
like to know also, how has that gone up over the last couple of months? Because it's only been a couple of months, correct?
correct.
Okay, so if 15 kids are being added a month, I'd like to
No,
know.
you're not gonna, it's
Okay.
gonna flatline now at this point.
Okay.
And I say trick question in the sense that K-5, without an ECC, the plan is to add some specialized programs there to alleviate some of the hemorrhaging that we're seeing at other buildings. So we know we have overcrowding and a special program that needs to come out of Mill Hill once this project is completed and switched and brought back to Dwight, because that's where it lived prior. But without good air quality, we can't keep those kids there. We also have some kids, we're hemorrhaging space at Osborne Hill. So if we can make some concessions and get some kids and some specialized programs out of there possibly, that would be also helpful. So we're really looking to maximize whatever space we have in a new building with students. That will help alleviate some of the congestion and the overcrowding that we're feeling at our other schools.
So are you saying now, this isn't just about building a neighborhood school? This is now about solving for problems the district is seeing at all the schools? So are you just saying now that we're just gonna take this opportunity at this point to right the wrongs we currently have at the other 10 or 11, whatever, however many elementary schools.
Well,
we have.
no, what I'm saying is that we do have a need for specialized programming space that's growing. And partly because we do a really good job in creating programs in-house to alleviate kids from having to be sent out, of keeping them in neighborhood schools with their friends and with their community members. So because of that, we need space to operate those programs. We currently have a program, 2 classrooms and other additional spaces at Mill Hill that school was not designed for, but is housing that we can commandeer that space back and have the music room, have the orchestra off the stage, have other programs that are being displaced right now because of the CLC that's at Mill Hill that we'd like to bring back to Dwight, but we can't until a new building or a renovation or whatever is done.
It was accessibility issues, right? It wasn't just, you said
Accessibility is a big part of it.
That's why they moved on.
Yeah, but air quality is also.
And air quality, I
Yeah.
get, okay.
But
So you say there's 240?
approximately 240 kids, yes.
240.
But 12 sections, regardless of the number of kids, there's a need for 12 classrooms, full classrooms, just for homeroom. So 2 of every grade level.
Not including these specialty classrooms you're talking about.
Not including the art room, not including a STEAM room, music room.
No, I'm talking about the specialty program.
No, not including that.
Okay. All right, and then the projections we saw at the last Board of Finance meeting when we discussed this show that the highest number of students pursuant to your most accurate and current projections is over the next 10 years, 252 students.
Yes.
Correct?
Correct.
Okay. How many are you trying to build this school to?
That
I thought that number, what I saw, I thought the last meeting was like 370?
78, yeah.
378?
Right. So I think the
Our
number.
distance from 250.
So I think the number of students, regardless, so let's put it this way. So if we have 2 CLC classrooms, they're gonna be in full-size classrooms that you would assume 50 total students. But that population, you won't fill it with 50 kids, but you're still building as if there were 50 kids coming. So if we put 4 of those classrooms, you're at 352, not enrollment, but space needs. So I think we're getting pretty close based on the amount of space we'll need in order to move programs into that building.
But if the CLC gets moved to one of these other options, such as at Oldfield.
Well, we won't put the CLC there.
Okay.
We put the ECC possibly.
Where? At Oldfield?
If that's a possibility, yes.
Okay. The CLC would never go to any other location?
No, it would have to stay within the building because it's a elementary program, not a preschool program. So they need access to time with non-disabled peers. So they push into their classes with their, for reading, possibly for math, for art, for gym, for all those things.
Okay. Okay. I like the idea of spending the $1 million to get a lot of these answers. However, I want to know how much of this $1 million that we spend is going to reduce the seed money of $3.4 million. Like you're gonna be doing borings, like what percentage are you gonna, if we move forward there, are you gonna be able to tell me, well, it's no longer 3.4, I presume that there's some number in here based on doing these borings and other things, you're gonna tell me that the 3.4 is gonna be going down, because we talk about 3.4, Mr. Gerber properly represented that, you guys show this as $65 million. I have to tell you personally, when I look at this project, you talk about the splitting of money, I see $70 million here, approximately. Maybe it's $1 million to $1.4 million less, $1.6 million less. But it's really, to me, all day long, starting at $70 million for 378 student build, which I'm still having a hard time justifying based on the population and where that population is going. So let's just talk about the 3.4. How much is that gonna go down? I know that you're looking at other options, not all this $1 million out there. But
Exactly.
do you have some sense, 1 million, 100,000, 200,000, more?
So according to our last special board meeting, over Mr. Selly, what the numbers they threw out there was approximately $250,000 for doing the borings and the first step of the design work. So I would say guarantee of the 250 would come down. It also would, by doing this work, we will get better numbers on what the total cost of the project will be. And the seed money is always based on a percentage of the total construction cost. So by getting those numbers, we could see even more reduction, but I would say at least probably close to $500,000 would be what they're saying off the top of their head, but it could be more.
And we may not use the whole amount.
Sure, that'd be great too. But is any of the $1 million going to be used to look at other possible solutions other than doing anything up at 12?
Yes. So as we talked about, whether we can put ECC at Riverfield, whether we can put it at Osborne Hill.
Yeah.
What the feasibility is over at Mona Terrace to put a more of a long-term location there, and the Walter Fitzgerald campus, that shell of a building, what the possibilities are there.
Sure. I guess my question is a little broader. And this came up at our meeting the last time. Is any of the $1 million going to be looked at to find another solution for the entire school at any other location?
No.
No.
Okay. So right now,
Another
as we're going
location
forward
hasn't
with
been-
spending $1 million, if the money, if the boring samples come back bad, if other things come back bad up at Dwight, we could be looking at spending not $70 million, 80 million, 90 million. We don't even have any idea what we're doing, and you have no other solution at all that we're looking at all in this $1 million or anything.
Not for those.
No, because we still have.
Because I'll tell you, I'm not spending 80 or 90 million dollars for this. I question whether.
We still have the
I mean,
footprint.
if it's an emergency where it grows to $100 million project, which I highly doubt, but we'll just go down that road for a minute. We still have the existing building that we know.
Yeah.
That we can do something with.
Okay.
Although it's not the best solution, not even close. Comparing it to a new building up on the field while you can keep the kids in the building, it is still a backup if the project comes in at $90 million.
Do you mind if because I just want to make sure, I think what Jim is asking, and based on the 7 things we're going to study, all of those relate to, somebody said untethering the ECC from Dwight, right? Which enables you to do a renovation instead of a rebuild. But I think the answer to Mr. Walsh's question is no, we're not looking, that's all it's looking at is potential other options for the ECC, not for
Another location.
For the Dwight School.
I don't
The
know.
answer to that is no.
Is there another location in that part of town to build?
But that's not what,
elementary school?
well, but I think his question is, is the $1 million gonna work for that? And your answer is no.
No, I mean, I don't know of another property that has, you know.
Can I say?
12 acres.
Yeah, just need 12 acres for an elementary school.
We need a fair amount. My last project that I worked on was a high school, and there is some, they're not gonna reimburse you on trying to build it on 3 acres of land.
Okay.
The state does wanna see a significant piece of
How many
property.
acres is Stratfield? Yeah.
I know that was built a long time ago.
I'm asking you, what is the acreage at Stratfield? Okay, can you tell me, get us the board that information?
Stratfield's on 6.76 acres according to last year's budget book.
Wow.
Jeff Peterson.
He's stealing my thunder.
So I know with 6 acres, it becomes challenging to put in 1 level building plus parking plus, some field space and all that. That's what I'm saying. You're looking at 10, 11 acres. I don't know if there's any property up there that's for sale at the.
What's the difference?
Okay, hang on, wait, let's make sure we stay in order. Are you,
How large is the property where you have the Walter Fitzgerald campus on, that whole property? This is size of-
11.74. Well, it's divided, because remember when you bought it, you divided it. You have the derelict building that you designated for town property. And the one that's being used for Walter Fitzgerald. So you reserved for yourselves the 6 acres over there. And it's, so 11.74 is the total of that Barberry property.
Okay.
That goes to Mr. Matola's point, we're gonna build an elementary school around the corner from another elementary school.
Doesn't really matter. It's on the west side of town. To me, it doesn't, you know, we're,
Now
we're,
you're-
we're.
now
It
you're-
doesn't matter to you, but no.
Over time, you're gonna.
guys,
Hey,
we,
this is
hang
my
on.
time. It's not your time, it's
hang on,
Jason's.
yeah,
I mean,
please.
I think we have to then, again, talk about the feasibility of, are we gonna be able to bus kids? What's that gonna cost over the course of 25 years, 30 years?
I'm just exploring possibility.
Yeah, I
Because,
gotcha.
because there's gonna be a number for me that's too much to build up a dwelling.
Gotcha. I understand.
So that's, I'm just exploring possibilities.
I'm with you.
Okay, that's, I think all the questions I have right now. I just wanna know how this $1 million and what it's gonna get us. Thank you.
Okay, so everyone understands the scope of what's gonna be looked at with $1 million. Is what?
I don't think we understand the scope of what it's gonna look at all. I don't. I think we know that there's gonna be 7 places that it's gonna look at.
That's what I'm talking about in terms of scope.
Right, but there's a lot of things that can happen. There's a lot of things that can be looked at and can't be looked at. And to Jim's point, and my point is, I don't want this to get done and it comes back and then, well, did we think about not even building it, Dwight? Or do we think about, you know, building a giant step? I think that specificity is gonna help us here. And also just to back to what I was saying, your point, because there's a number that is too much for me too. I totally agree with that. We don't know what it's gonna be. But that's all the more reason to, let's get that Dwight piece done. Let's commit specific dollars to that. So that's done, because that's the real anxiety here. I mean, Jim's point's good. If this thing comes back to $100 million, no one's gonna have an appetite for it.
Right.
But I don't think it is gonna come back. I mean, I've listened to Silver Petroselli a bunch of times, and I get that that number needs more studies to have any weight behind it. But at the same token, you can't just say, oh, it's gonna be $7 million. It could come in
There's a
lower.
project that's almost completed now that I was part of. That is a high school that's 3 stories that had to be elevated 18 feet because of flood zone. And it's only it's a $120 million project, so.
Okay, but let me just, I guess maybe I'm confused, but I'm not sure why there's confusion. I think what I understand in terms of the scope, and we talked about the 7 items, none of what's gonna be analyzed with this $1 million contemplates not having a school and the Dwight, and let me just finish, not having a school. All of these scenarios that we're looking at are for the, seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, the main purpose is, you know, we've got these preliminary reports that suggest maybe there's a $17 million difference between a renovation and a rebuild, right?
Yep.
But that's apples to oranges, a renovation without an ECC and a rebuild with an ECC.
Correct.
So now 17 million's got to get you the ECC space somewhere, right? So couple things. We don't know if those numbers are reliable at all because there's so many unknowns. And both of those scenarios have all sorts of risks that are unquantified. Right, so we are trying to delve deeper into those things so that we understand what they are. And if it turns out that the renovation is substantially, you know, maybe it's not 17 million, maybe it's 30 million difference or whatever, then, you know, what are the alternatives for the ECC? That's what we're looking at. And we talked about Riverfield, Osborne Hill, and we talked about doing the traffic study at Jennings, because with the Jennings thing, if we can't do Jennings, then that implies that we need more ECC classrooms at whatever new option we come up with, right? But none of this $1 million is contemplating addressing the question that Jim asked, which is not having a Dwight school at that property. We're not going down that road.
But
Okay, just want to be clear.
I just want to add a little something to that.
Okay.
Because what Superintendent said, that we do have a school there that
Yes.
could be renovated without the 9,000 square foot addition. And
Yeah.
I would imagine, and we can ask for, the work to be done exploring that property should be easily split between the 9,000 square feet and the renovation of.
Do you mind, can you, and I'm not sure if the board, can you explain the 9,000 square feet addition and why that's necessary, just so
Well,
everyone
when
understands?
they built schools 60 years ago, they didn't have the operational functionality we do now, so we need office spaces to service kids. They didn't have social workers, they didn't have OT, PT, speech and language. You need dedicated space for art. We have STEAM now. There's a lot more space that is needed to run a fully operational elementary school. And that's why the 9,000 square feet will help us get.
Understood, okay. I just, again, I thought I understood the scope, but it seems like there's confusion about the scope, so I just want to make sure that and I understand the wording is vague. I hear you. I also hear Mr. Gerber saying they really haven't had internal discussion, so doesn't want to quite tie down the wording of a resolution into something that hasn't fully been discussed.
I really said with the backup memo, and I'll just clarify what I was saying, because we're throwing out these 7 ideas. So this is what I've heard. You got renovate Dwight, with the addition, rebuild Dwight up top, period. Then rebuild Dwight with an ECC. Then you got Osborne Hill ECC possibility, Riverfield ECC possibility. Then you got Mona Terrace and Giant Steps. Okay.
And traffic study. Yeah.
Right, and in this memo, you have the first thing that says establishing ECC. And it says town facilities. Does that mean the way it's written is is that Mona Terrace and Giant Steps? Is it just the town? Then you got the Jennings renovation project, which isn't in that 7 that we discussed, right? That's not in the 7 we discussed.
Well, I don't.
Well, it's in there, right? No, but I'm saying what I just listed 7 items for you guys. Dwight renovate, Dwight rebuild, or Dwight new up top, and Dwight up top with ECC. Then you got Osborne Hill, Riverfield, Mona Terrace, Giant Steps. That's the 7. But in here you have this Jennings renovation project. Okay, so that's another one. Senior community center needs. I get that that's Mona Terrace. I'm just saying that it could be tightened up a little bit, and I'm worried that it's gonna come back and people are like, well, why didn't we look at this? We talked about this.
That's legit. I think the reason why we're talking about this scope is for this reason. We don't want this study to be done and then it come back and people say, wait a minute, what about these other things we should have looked at?
But I think $250,000 to $300,000 will get us all the questions answered at Dwight. The other $700,000 we can figure out. It's not as time pressing to get those answers. While they could happen in parallel, we want to get the Dwight stuff going so that by April, at end of April at the latest, first week in May, we can have those answers and those questions all laid out with the 3 options. Now, if it comes back a little bit later on Mona Terrace and the others, that's fine. But I think we're really pressed on getting the Dwight going, so. Resolutions for $1 million, how we spend it?
Yeah.
Specifically.
I'm sorry, I'm not, so how are they separate? Because let's say you do the Dwight study and the answer comes back that there's a very material difference between the two. And let's just say the lower cost is renovation. You have to know.
No, I agree, but
cost
what I'm
of those
saying
other-
is,
so
if
they're
the
all
other ones
combined.
come back a week or 2 later, we really want to get them started up at Dwight.
Agreed.
I
Yes.
think the Mona Terrace, they're not gonna be in that building very long. They're
Gotcha.
not gonna be boring, they're not gonna be doing that.
I hear you. Okay.
The other thing I'm just saying is that for example, for the renovate versus build is new. I know you guys are gonna think about this, but it should be clear that renovating has to include numbers on, okay, where are the kids going when you're renovating?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
Everyone,
It's gonna
everyone
take some
understands
time,
that.
that's why we need to get going on that.
So again, I'm just putting it out there, and I think it might make sense to just have a specific amount of money for the Dwight part. And I don't think that's super complicated to do. I'm probably not the person to do it, but I think that might make sense. Given.
Are you worried that the amount is too high? I'm
worried that we don't exactly know how the project's getting managed, what's getting done. That there's certainly different perspectives on what should happen at all. So I think being tight in what we're gonna do is preferable. I don't see I don't see the drawback. Silver Petroselli gave us a number that they said that they could do it for. Mr. Testani's, reiterated that number. So
May I comment on that, Ms. Charlton?
Yes.
I don't think we have to do that, all due respect. Because now we're starting to put parameters on exactly what this group has to do. I mean, we do have certain parameters based on what we've discussed already. Let them do their work and then they can come back to us. And I think you were talking about now we're suddenly getting into the scope of what can be done and not be done, and that's possibly true, or what is the better options. We're going to get numbers and information. At that point, the Board of Ed's going to make a decision what they think is the best educationally and make a proposal to the funding bodies. And then certainly they're going to take into consideration, I hope, the cost of what they want to do. And then we're going to have to make some decisions as a town with respect to funding. So I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's get this work done. Let's get these questions answered. And then we can see where we are. I don't think we should get answer to these questions so we know what the numbers are. And then based on that, the Board of Ed's going to make recommendations from an educational standpoint. And then we're going to have to make some decisions. I see it.
Thank you, Mr.
We shouldn't be talking about at this point, what's the best option?
No, agree. No. And we are talking about the $1 million to do an analysis. I agree. We should not be going down the rabbit hole because we don't have the information. We're talking about getting the information to have the discussion. And that's what the agenda item is. So yes, agree. I think what Shane is saying is listen, we have to, based on this conversation, get comfortable that $1 million is enough to do the full evaluation and answer all the questions that this board has. That's it.
well, but this portion of Dwight, it's just like all recognize that the Board of Ed asked for this in the seed money. Like this was on there. This is part of what we're asking to do was in the Board of Ed seed money. And now it's a town project. So
No, I think
that's
it's
a little bit
very
different.
different from what they asked for. I don't think they
Well,
were
it's part of it,
asking.
though. It's part of it.
Well, a small part, but what they were asking for was seed money for one project, not an evaluation of multiple buildings.
Agreed. Yes.
So
Yeah.
I think based on this board's questions and the Board of Selectmen's input.
All right. Well, I see where everyone is on it. So
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Jarrell.
I just want to second what John was saying. I really see this $1 million as we went back and asked a lot of questions. And they need assistance evaluating and responding to all of these questions. And I view this money as doing the proper due diligence to give us our answers. That's the way I see it. And that, we don't know what Dwight, I mean, this is not gonna give us the answer necessarily. It'll certainly help with the possible barriers to build or the additional expense. If anything, it's giving us more than, looking at the other sites and helping us consider some other options. That's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah, Madam Chair.
So I understand your point, but I think it's hard for them to articulate how much exactly is for Dwight. I think to your point, we are limiting what they're gonna do. I think we wanna allow them to have some runway to come back and answer all our questions and make a long-term, proper strategic decision here.
Agreed. Mr. Curley, 1 second. Ms. Vitale, I think did you want to chime in?
I appreciate all these questions. I had some at the Board of Selectmen meeting, but I just want to reiterate that, Mr. Penley, thank you. The Board of Education has, voted on a long-range facilities plan, voted on planning principles. Ultimately, they're the ones to decide where they send children to school and where they place their programming. And there seems a lot of discussion about where other boards might be making those decisions. So just want to remind everyone. Also, in terms of the group that's going to be working on this 1 million, I would just ask the administration to make sure you have somebody with good building construction experience. Project management is great, but typically, this would have gone, the Board of Ed would have made its funding request. It would have gone to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen would have given a charge to the building committee. The Board of Selectmen could have reduced the funding request. We could have said, we don't want $3.4 million. We want $1 million. And in that $1 million, we want you to look at like new, renovating the existing footprint, renovate with the ECC, all the scenarios that we talked about tonight. Gotten a building committee together so it doesn't put strain on the town administration, and we would have moved forward to get those answers about the different scenarios at Dwight. And then based on what those numbers were, the Board of Ed would then have had to have the discussion about, would they be comfortable? Is it 60 million or is it 100 million? And if it's 100 million, then maybe they wouldn't be putting forward the full funding request. So just want to bring it back. It's really hard to not lose sight of what past practice was, and have been burnt a little bit with Mill Hill. It pains me to hear that a school that was just recently renovated, that we had dedicated space for, is having music on a stage. And that in part could be that not the Board of Ed, another board made a decision based on funding to make that school smaller in terms of capacity than it was when you factor in the portables. So
but it sounds like we're getting to the same
we
place.
are,
that you
and
just
I
described.
totally.
And this is gonna go to the Board of Selectmen first.
Right, and it went to the Board of Selectmen. We
Yes.
voted on it.
No, I mean, once this project is, let's say, all of us in the RTM, everyone approves the $1 million. Ultimately, a set of proposals will come back. They have to be evaluated by the Board of Ed and then the Board of Selectmen before it ever comes back here. I think to me, the only thing I'm trying to make sure is that everybody understands what's being evaluated so that we don't, and I hopefully we got there by providing our questions. I asked everybody to submit questions. So we shouldn't be having new questions anymore. As long as those questions are covered, I think that we we get answers back through this analysis and other information you provide. That's the process. So I think we're on the same page as all.
I think we voted for it, approved it. Had some of the same questions at the Board of Selectmen level in terms of prioritizing and making sure that Dwight we're not getting analysis paralysis with, adding more and more and more scenarios when we know that we have a school that needs to be addressed. And I think that in terms of, if we do this research and we find out the numbers are astronomical and it's not necessarily feasible, I think it would be valuable to look at other centrally located schools, Riverfield, Osborne Hill, because you have to maybe add elementary school classrooms there. It's good to know what your ability is for the future, going out,
agreed,
20, 50 years. So not trying to stop what you're doing here.
No, I think
but I would, there's been a lot of discussion and the Board of Ed has acted, and I want to be respectful of this board, my own board that we took votes on, and the Board of Ed, because they have also acted. And just ask as officio, just if the Board of Ed chair has anything else to add in terms of clarity for reimbursement or renovate like new, because we haven't really done a renovate like new in the district. So I want to make sure that everybody understands what that entails. And also, ideally, we want to maximize wherever we decide to build, we want to maximize state reimbursement. And the state has certain parameters of what they're looking for when they prioritize projects, if it's furthering the educational interest of the state and what their priorities are. So there's a nuance of that, which I wouldn't expect the Board of Finance and even the Board of Selectmen to be really up on, but the Board of Education can speak to that. And I think it might be valuable just in terms of a framework of where everybody's coming from a little bit. And there is a financial potentially impact on the reimbursement rate. There is.
Did you want to say anything, Mr. Peterson?
I haven't been recognized by the board, so.
Would you like to go up?
But you
Yeah, I mean, we should, yeah, Mr. Peterson, go ahead.
No, I would make all of this much simpler. The Board of Ed has presented a plan. Board of Finance has raised questions. Board of Selectmen has raised questions. And this motion, as I understand it, is largely the genesis of this is from the first selectman. So in that sense, I am for it. I think we've talked at great length about what the money is going to be looking at. I hope for a process where all boards are involved in an open communication. And I think that is going to accomplish the goals of making sure that the Board of Ed's voice in this continues to be heard and the questions that the funding bodies in the town want answered are answered. I just, like, for me, that's the most important part, is an ongoing dialogue. Because you'll have the questions that you have and you may have follow-up questions to that, and we just need to keep talking and make sure that everyone understands what's at stake. And the Board of Ed has made a preference. And, I think everyone on the board is eager to get that moving forward. And I think $1 million is the way to do it. If we move ahead with that, it feels like we're going around in circles right now.
I agreed. Okay.
Bring it to a vote.
Yes.
Mr. Curley's been waiting patiently.
Yeah, I know. Just wanted to okay. Mr. Curley, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think everyone's on board that more data is a good thing and we'll be able to make an informed decision. I just want to make the point that anytime we get it, even with additional information on the renovation side or renovation alternative, by definition of what the renovation means is that there's going to be uncertainty there's risk that we just won't be able to know or quantify. There's much more risk to the number on the renovation side. So I just want to make sure people understand that while we may be asking for more data, we may not get all of our answers or questions answered on the renovation side. But having made that point, I'd like to call the question. Let's go to a vote.
Okay.
Second that.
Okay, is there, before we do that, is there any public comment?
I'll give public comment.
What's that?
I'm gonna give public comment. Sorry, Mr. Curley, I was gonna jump up before you called the question. I just was gonna explain that difference between a renovate like new and what we've done historically here in Fairfield, which are alterations and extensions. So sorry, Jennifer Jacobson. Sorry, thank you, Mr. Stark. I forgot to say my name. So Mill Hill, Holland Hill, Riverfield, all of those were alterations and extensions. Those were not renovates like new. So for anyone who is unfamiliar with that term, we're going to be gutting the existing building down to the superstructure of it. And a little bit has to remain to be able to be eligible to call it that, but it really is something totally different than what we've done here. So everything else would be done. What I brought up at the Board of Selectmen today, for those who were not able to attend that meeting or haven't had a chance to listen, was I agree it's incredibly important that the Board of Selectmen and the 9 of you here tonight are clear on what you're getting back, so that at that time, we're not further delayed. And what I tried to clarify was things like structural engineers, civil engineers, HVAC people have to go into all of these buildings, tell you what's feasible or not. So the septic systems, obviously. So that's my expectation, that all of those consultants are coming in so that we get accurate numbers, especially on the Mona Terrace. That's been looked at so many times by the town. So I'm glad you had the conversation and that we were clarified and we were able to be clear on what consultants are going to be hired and what you're expecting to get back on all of these sites.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So we can vote on this item. So all in favor of approving the bond resolution set forth in item 10, please raise your hand. Okay, it is unanimous 8-0. Thank you, everyone. And it would be great to get updates on this as we go along, if that's possible. All right, so we'll move forward to item 11. By the way, thank you, Mr. Castani. Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Ms. Jacobson, Mr. Peterson. I'm sorry. All right.
How much money have we spent so far today?
What's that?
How much money have we spent?
Spend some money.
I'm gonna add it up. See what we're spending, because this is what I'm talking about running out of money.
Okay. All right, so item 11. Item 11, to hear, consider and adopt a bond resolution entitled, "A Resolution Appropriating $1 million for costs associated with the Complete and Safe Streets Project and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation." Motion to hear this item, Mr. Hero, seconded by Mr. Myers. Okay, so the backup for this item, and I should have asked this question earlier. Mr. Becker, I only saw the bond resolution in the backup. Is there something else on this?
It was the backup.
That's the only backup. Okay, so are you going to explain to us what this is and how we came up with the million then?
So this is directly tied to the Complete Streets ordinance and initiative that I know there's been some discussion about, including during the Apple planning summit. We also recently received a $1 million state bond, which will kind of form us officially as a grant for construction. That would be in the Greenfield Hill section, generally, you know, focusing on Reading Road and some of the other you know, roads in that area that can then be connected and added with various elements of items that are in complete streets, which is essentially the road safety, pedestrian pathways. And that is a construction, so as an example, that's a construction bonding allocation, so the traffic surveys and the actual engineering and planning, we actually have to deliver on that end as a municipality in order to tap into the construction piece. So the front end of it, we're gonna have to pay for. So as we've been working through all the complete streets work, with our engineering department, public works, administration, and police department, and the traffic safety, and we don't actually have a bucket of funds to draw on for that. So just a survey for Reading Road alone, roughly, you know, $65,000. If you want to do the design and engineering piece, by the time we're done, we're looking at roughly 300 all in to get to the point to then actually be able to do any element of construction. And that's really just that one road. So also in the waterfall, we've done some internal work related to South Benson, and are hoping to ask the end of the winter or spring for funds. But outside of what we've done internally, we've kind of reached the point of what we can do internally in engineering. We do need to bring consultants in to get more realistic with the design elements of that. And these
So,
issues are.
I'm sorry, it sounds like this is just seed money then for, okay.
And it is essentially seed money towards the overall complete streets in some of these locations, and then also with that, our ability to bond allocation. And so we don't have a bucket of funds available, so this is us trying to start that. So in the waterfall, we did put roughly 4.6 million over the next few years in there. That waterfall had 550,000 allocated in fiscal 26 bonding, then it had 1.5 and 27, and some various amounts moving forward. It's just those are, you know, initial placeholders to start working on complete streets. And so we are looking to get an authorization to start doing it.
Okay, Mr. Walsh?
Why wouldn't we start putting this in the budget? Why don't we put our money where our mouth is on complete streets? And start putting it in the budget on a yearly basis, and you tell us what projects you're gonna do in the next year, and we just start paying. Why would that be?
Totally possible that we could look at starting to do that. I would tend to agree that long-term large items that occur year after year at some point should be considered to be budgeted or funded. We've had a discussion about paving, and should have sidewalks. You know, so that's something we can look at and look at phasing in. This is seed money at this stage, and projects that are at least the next few years size. And right now, as a community, it's as much as a pedestrian, bicyclist, scooter rider, it is getting average, every other bank is average every year. Somebody, commissioners struck by a vote. So this is just, we are trying to and safety distance off the ground. This is the funding pathway, but I do think that we as a community should want similar, some other things, probably facing, these initiatives and start to try to, right now, our budget actually to fund the paving for our sidewalks. So there are many things that.
So, and this million is in the, I finally found it. Is this in the waterfall?
Really well, so South Bennington for the actual construction of that project, as an example, we put half in there. That's something we're hoping.
So is this million in the waterfall?
Yes, there's 3 streets, bucket of money for 4.6 million. On schedule, I believe it's just below the South Bennington project.
So, yeah, I see South Benson. So how much of cash flow was in this year for what you're talking about? Did we have the million in here?
FY 26, we had 550 as a placeholder, so this was.
So this is more than what we had.
This would be more.
And we would expect to expend $1 million this next year. We expect to expend that. So we have to adjust the waterfall by $450,000. Okay, that's what and
Just right off the bat, if you take Reading by spring,
yeah, I'm sorry, and I for some reason I can't. Maybe I should. I need my reading glasses, but I can't find it.
And I would caution, we tried to, many different, in many areas with these projects, with that waterfall, we trying to layer in, accurate numbers and timelines, but.
Oh, wait, I see it, I see it.
I would say that.
550 here, townwide road safety improvements, new sidewalks, complete streets. So the total we have, total project cost is $4,650,000. And we had 550 in the current year. So does this mean we'd be pulling forward some that was in later
Pulling
years?
forward from that, and I anticipate the overall amount to go over what you had seen in the previous total for that. Still anticipate that by the time we go on July. It's nice and long.
How much is to be spent by June 30th? That's really, we're gonna start talking about this, but. 300,000 for this one project.
I'm not here saying, despite the fact that I do agree with you, that we're going to put this into the budget this year. So we have to be able to put things into the budget and phase things into the budget over time, while also making sure that we don't use the budget too much in one fell swoop, cause a spike in the bill rate.
David, can you, I'm hearing that people.
Yeah, so I agree with you that over time, initiatives like this, if they're going to be every single year for millions of dollars, just like paving, just like sidewalks, that they long-term should be things that we're working towards putting into the budget versus bonding. But we could also make that argument on a lot of things, and I agree with you, but we have to, I can't guarantee you that in the budget this year, that certainly the first selectmen's proposal is going to have $1 million for complete streets in there, right? So paving as an example, we still have to look at what we're gonna do for finishing the acceleration and then what the appropriate number is long-term. Obviously, inflation has had an impact on that. We still, within the budget, only have $80,000 allocated for sidewalks. We know that number from a long-term perspective is probably light. There's a lot of other things that this exact same argument could be made on. So
when are we gonna have that discussion at our table?
I don't know, it depends when it comes before us.
Because I think we should start talking about, we have a bunch of these things, we have a bonding problem with all the projects we have coming before us. how are we gonna start getting things into our budget, properly budget for it? for
So,
expenses?
so we're gonna talk, we'll talk about that, in a little bit, but I think that what we talked about, in the fund balance committee meeting, which we'll get back to a little bit later in this agenda, is that by February, we're looking to have this plan updated by February, right? February-ish, which would, address the bonding problem in its entirety. And then the point of redoing this plan is to address that bonding problem, not just for this, but in total. So I think some of it's gonna depend. I think after we see that updated capital plan, you know, we can start to figure some of that out.
Yeah, and I think that we are in the very early stages of looking at what this budget is coming up. While interest rates remain high, that many of our revenue sources are likely to remain relatively stagnant year over year. So those are going to be pressures that we have. So while it may sound like something that we agree would be nice to put into the budget in this particular year, the question becomes, what rate of taxation would, is it worth, or should we use bonding, continue to use bonding responsibly, but as a tool to get these projects done, start moving in that direction. Some amount of dollars.
Can I just,
So
and David, I don't wanna go down too much of a so we have a project here in the waterfall, Complete Streets, 4.6 million, taking place over a 3 or 4 year period. And that's all we know at this point. So to me, the comparison to paving is capital, but it's recurring capital, and it's 2 million a year, so we just put it in the budget because it recurs. This is not yet to the point, even close to where we've done something and now we just have recurring annual amounts. We haven't even started really with whatever the vision of this is. So at some point, we get into this, we figure out what it means. I'm not even sure what it means really. And theoretically, we get to a point where we're at a steady state spend going forward. But I mean, I don't think we're started yet.
A lot of it is project by project now. So one project's gonna be 3 million, one project may be 500,000. So it is, yes, we're not at that point right now. And we are facing a rapidly increasing issue on the ground from a safety perspective, and we're trying to start moving in the right direction. So
You know what the biggest safety issue I see right now, I don't know how it's being addressed, is 14 and 15-year-old motorized bicycles that go 35 to 40 miles an hour all over town. While kids are looking at this is what I've seen 5 times this week. Kids going this way, looking at their phone, going like this. A car could pull out of the driveway at any point in time.
It's true.
And then the other part is when they're all doing wheelies with their motorized bikes. So why can't we outlaw them? I mean, seriously, I mean, this is the biggest, it's gonna take a kid to get killed for this stuff to be resolved.
That's not part of, I mean, we are working on that with the police.
Agree.
Yeah.
Some of that may turn into state versus what we can do locally, but we are looking, we've met now several times with the police about that. We're trying to look at things that are in our control, and I can say that while some of these instances that I just outlined involved, involve youths, they actually, many of the instances that we're finding, they're not that bucket. So yes, we're having issues on that end, but 50 some odd years old and a vehicle, and we could sit there and run the statistics for everybody. But obviously, involvement on the public safety side of the house, I pay very close attention. It's happening every other day.
Before, I want to get to Mr. Stark, but I think Mr. Gerber had a comment.
I just wanted to make the point that a lot of the early work is survey and design. And with surveys and design come grant opportunities. And they really do come, and we just got one. So we need to get this going so that we have enough information in a solid enough form that we can apply for grants.
And we don't have any grants contemplated in that money in the waterfall at this point, right?
We don't, but we do have a grant for $1 million for Reading Road, so we know that's an offset, once we do the survey, survey work, that, we can apply that $1 million grant to Reading and, Mill Plain. So,
No, my only point being that money that we have in the waterfall could,
no, that.
this would enable us to offset
That
some
was
of the.
unexpected, we did not, you know.
Yeah, the more of these that we do, these design, and we talked about that with a lot of other projects, the more we have projects that we can start to try to target those dollars. So we, not streets, but downtown resiliency, we've spoken about continuing on with that and getting to a point that we can start to target those dollars. So we're trying to do that, and this will allow us to.
Mr. Stark?
I was just gonna say that it sounds like it's gonna lead to capital expenditures, and they don't sound like they're recurring in the same way that paving is. And so I think it should be regarded as a setup cost and capitalized into the cost of the projects.
Thank you. Ms. Ruggiero?
The Reading Road that you mentioned that we got $1 million for, that circle, is that part of that grant that they're building?
No, that we are doing with in-house staff, and we're using DPW budget funds for that. So we were able to do that internally, which actually save a lot of money, and it's actually going to set us up to be able to do more of, we're trying to do that as we get successfully get that done. That allows us to not necessarily have to go out to contractors. And so you look at a window like this, it wasn't necessarily initially slated to do it right now. The weather was better, internal crews had availability, so we're working over to do that.
That's really, I think it's gonna be really nice to have that there and slow down the momentum of traffic.
Yeah.
Cause I take that road every day. So what is the $1 million, the grant for Reading Road? Cause I live right back, by there. What is that gonna incorporate? Is that gonna be sidewalks, or what is going towards that? Cause I know we already did the rubbering of the strip. I forget what it's called, but the bumping.
Yeah.
So what are they gonna do to that area? Cause it's, people.
Well, so that's to be determined, because the early money that we need now is for the survey work and the design recommendations. So they're all traffic calming, and part of it is actually looking at, if we can, after the survey work's done, putting in like some sort of gravel walking paths as one option. But on Mill Plain, there are traffic calming measures you can take to like bump out curbs, make crosswalks. Jim lives right near there, so I'm sure this is near and dear to your heart, but to bump out curbs so that kids going to school can cross and not get hit, and anyone else. So we're going to have to wait and see what they come back with, because it really is a discipline that is, you have. It's an engineering and planning discipline that we're just going to have to see what data comes back with.
So if they come, I'm sorry, David, did you want to go first?
No.
I'm gonna say, if they came back and said that we need, on Reading Road, because there's always people walking and bicycle, it's dangerous. You've had 2 deaths there. So if they come back and say, we need to have this gravel, like you suggested, or said, throw it as an option, and we need like a 4-foot gravel path. Does the town have the right, because the first 10 feet belongs to the town, can they take that and make it?
So that's what the survey work is actually for. The right of way on Reading and some of those other roads they vary a lot depending on which house it is. They vary, every few feet, they could change. So the survey work really will let us know what our rights are, and even so, there's still there's still a process with the neighbors.
I just thought the first 10 feet you had to, because there's setbacks and stuff. I thought that was
It
the town's
actually is.
power.
If I wish it was that easy, it's actually more complicated than that.
And one of the things is we don't, on a lot of these roads, and even at one point we did, the roads have changed over time. We don't have the exact of all the different items and utility poles and whatnot. But Reading being an example of somewhere where we talk about gravel or some other surface, not necessarily paving or well, concrete or paving, but not necessarily actual sidewalks, but going with something that's more of a pathway, which might be more fitting for that area. And then from how many, lane miles you'd have to do, and with, if we get into stone walls and mailboxes, things, it's something that might be actually more doable, and then gets people off the road, and that's what we're trying to look at and.
So the $1 million that's part of the grant will go through that and like fund the survey, is what you're saying.
Oh, no, well,
That's
it'll
the
help fund,
construction piece.
this bond will
The
help
bond
fund the
will fund.
survey and other surveys. The $1 million will help with construction.
The bond is on the survey and the design. The actual construction is what the bond is for. You can't use the bonded money for the design.
Yeah, it's for the actual
They wanna
construction
see it
of
shovel
something.
ground.
Got it. All right, thank you very much. That's helpful.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah, just one comment. You mentioned paving, so I guess at some point, and this relates back to, what Kevin was saying, and just given the nature of these type of things, I think he's probably hit it right. But there is, every year we're paving, we're spending money on paving, and it seems to be at some point, you're paving a road that, gosh, maybe we should have, even little things, we should add a little paint to it. Is there gonna be some overlap between these costs and what we're doing every single year? Not to miss an opportunity, in other words,
Yeah.
potentially cheap opportunity.
No, and so this year as an example, when the paving list went out, and then again, like in the spring and in the fall, and same with sidewalks. If it had the possibility, that anywhere that we thought that it might touch something that would be more complete streets, it didn't necessarily get done. Or in some instances, when we were in certain spots, if there were elements that we could do, and they're getting done. So ADA enhancements, better striping, and sidewalks. Some of that has already been going, and now they're taking an even more critical look. But if they're gonna do something and it's going to be near an area that we think in a year we would wanna do complete streets, it might get, pulled aside, get a better look at, that might be able to get those types of enhancements. So we're trying to be much more critical and not let it just out the door. I mean, even in the spring, it was gonna go, the list was gonna go in the newsletter of these streets, and we pulled it for a week to get it right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Matola, did you have a question?
No, let's vote on this, please.
No, I have a question. Hang on. So just, I support this. I guess I'm just still vague on how you're going about it. So how do you come up with a plan in terms of where you prioritize? So you mentioned that we've had a number of pedestrian and bike, whatever, accidents. Are we doing some kind of like risk rating, or how are we deciding like what we do? $1 million isn't a lot of money, right? I'm sure there's hundreds of areas in town. As anybody that knows me, I'm a big walker and biker. I'm out there every day. I know how dangerous it is around town, and lack of sidewalks, and biking is very dangerous. But how are we looking at that? And are we gonna have a plan that sort of lays out, here's what we want to do over the next 10 years, 20 years, and here's our top priorities? How did you think about that? And
Yes.
how are you deciding where to direct this first million?
So this first bucket of funds, naming a few areas. So one, obviously, because of the funding opportunity up in Reading, and also that in part tied to the deaths that occurred.
Right.
And it's not just Reading Road, there's a connectivity and then other, neighboring roads, as much as we can continue in that general vicinity and the issues that we know. So that's a piece there, and we do have data about, the need for traffic calming, the need to get the pedestrians off, speed, there's a metric-based piece for that. And when I mentioned South Benson, started bumbling up earlier this spring, and as a concern, all the way, basically running all the way from Old Post into Jennings Beach. Started as neighbors, and we do very much so pay attention to neighbor feedback, but at the same time, you know, residents may think that there's an issue and then maybe there isn't actually. It's not, the loudest one gets the money, isn't it? They
Do-
were.
Okay, do we have a plan yet though, or no, or we're just
So-
kind of responding ad hoc to
No,
something?
so I was saying on that one in particular is, it then caused us to do more studies and realize we have a major volume issue there. And so we're trying to address, you know, something that we are able to quantify from a plan, and if you wanna take the.
Yeah, I'll take,
questions coordinator,
so
please.
the answer is we do not have we do not have that infrastructure in place yet. So we are currently responding to low hanging fruit, but we are working on it. Like, it's taking up a ton of our time, but we need a more scientific, data-driven way of ranking. Right now, it's complaints, and then the studies are done on the areas of complaint, and then a decision made is whether those complaints are valid or not. And that's sort of traditionally the way it's been done. And we just happen to have some areas that we know they're valid. So, yeah, but it's.
And I guess I was just thinking somebody, and I'm not trying to equate this to paving, but paving, we did like a whole inventory of the whole town, and kind of,
Yeah.
is there the intent to maybe get some outside help and do something like that at some point, or not? Or not?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
We're just, now we're on low hanging fruit, things we know about, complaints, et cetera, but eventually.
For like open slots, you know, we are looking at people with certain skill sets to fill them that can actually do that work internally. And we have a Safe Streets for All $350,000 grant, but we're gonna need somebody to help us administer that, whether it's someone at MetroCog or someone like a part-time consultant for a period of time. But we have an ordinance that I helped write, and we have to get it, you know, in place. In order to be fair and efficient, we need to better be able to rank the priorities in application.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Public comment? Okay.
I'd just like to say, I'm gonna approve this because it's kind of its first year. But, you know, first of all, we're starting to see what the true cost of this legislation is. It's now hitting us. We know it's gonna be like $4.6 million over the next 5 years or whatever it's gonna be. Plus, there's gonna be other programs. We're already going above what this year's allocation is by this $1 million grant by approximately $350,000 over. So we already have to change it. I would like to see some type of ranking. I'd like to get this in the budget. It might take a while. We might have to bring it in over a 4 or 5 year period of time. But I'd like to have this be a budget, just like I'd like the sidewalks to be back in the budget. I know it's a $5 million plan. I wouldn't even be bonding $5 million to catch up and then have a certain amount be in for sidewalks every single year for repairs. And looking forward to finally getting the paving budget back in the budget. These things are constant repair issues. These are standard repair issues. This is what any corporation would be doing. We wouldn't be bonding this for 20 years, paying the interest. Matter of fact, I almost think like items like this that come before us, you should have something. What is the interest cost over the 20 years at approximately what we're paying for bonding costs? So this board and other boards can look at it and say, do we want to bond this? Do we want to bond this $1 million, or is it really going to cost us like $1.4 million over the next? I'm not saying that's the number, but it might not be bad to see what the interest cost is going to be on bonding items.
All right. Were there any other questions? Okay. All right, so we can vote all in favor of approving the bond resolution set forth in item 11. Please raise your hand. Okay, it's unanimous 8-0. We'll move to item 12 to hear, consider, and act upon the reallocation of ARPA funds for Exhibit B in the backup. Motion to hear this item. Ms. Ruggiero, seconded by Mr. Matola. Okay, so the backup for this item was revised and posted supplementally online for members of the public. It's in a standalone, I think it's 68-page document that begins with the ARPA schedule and then has some additional backup with it. Mr. Becker, is this you?
That in our backup at the table?
I believe it was.
Schedule.
I was able to download the second.
I
Your
hope it's-
place should be in your back, yeah, it should be towards the end, there's a 11 by 17 document. and then
Yes.
Backup.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. I think I just found it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
So there are numerous provisions in this schedule. Some items are coming, so if there was excess funds or we're not believing that we're gonna be able to necessarily encumber. There are a number of items that have balances that you'll see throughout. There are notations on most of those that we anticipate, being able to either
Can we,
close.
I'm sorry, David,
Yeah.
can you, so there's, it looks like there's 5 new items on here, or we'll see,
There's
6. So the first
7
page,
new items.
okay,
Total.
all right, and then you're saying some things came off, right?
Yeah, so there's.
Okay, so maybe can we just quick go through the 7, so new items came on. Some items came off, looks like the unallocated portion is now down to 272,000, so can we just focus on page 1 for these new items?
Yes, so, do you want to go one by one?
Yeah, we'll go one by
just
one,
any
and if
questions on
anybody
them?
has questions, we can take them as they go.
Okay, so this, item number 1, the Greenfield Street property. This is a new item, and it's tied to affordable housing, 4,000. And there are numerous, documents, related to the purchase agreement in the backup.
Yep, did anybody, I hope the board had a chance to look at this, anybody have questions on this one?
I did not have a chance to look at it. Why don't you give a summary of what this is, where it is,
Alright.
where's Greenfield Street?
So, you want to, the Greenfield Street property.
Summary of-
But we didn't.
No, the Board of Selectmen did that. Maybe it's not today.
I think you gave us a heads up on this at a
Oh,
last meeting.
okay, I thought that was,
No, it's not. But this, yeah.
Yeah, the Greenfield Street property, where Habitat for Humanity, Greenfield is the street behind, Aldo's or Aldi's.
Aldi.
Aldi's. There were properties that we acquired and built, affordable housing with Habitat for Humanity. Another property became available like right near there. So there's enough there for 3 families and 1 duplex and 1 standalone. This is something that it's been pretty high value. So it's worked out really well so far, and this would be sort of continuing that relationship with Habitat.
Questions, Mr. Ruggiero?
So do we already put is this to enable us to put an offer in on that property to purchase it?
Well, we have an offer and we have a draft contract. We need to get the funding through the board and then we go back to actually execute the agreement. So we need to go through the boards for the money before we can actually.
It's subject to.
Subject to.
So there's a,
Similar like Sturgis.
There's an agreement.
You have to get through the boards to actually sign the dotted line because you don't have the money.
but they're not gonna try to sell it underneath their feet or something, you know?
We have an agreement with them, subject to.
So it's almost like a mortgage contingency or something, it's getting past the boards.
Mr. Walsh, good
Yeah,
question.
how do these residents work once they're built? Do we both own them, or we don't own them anymore, or are they owned by the town? How does that all work?
people own them with long-term leases, like, I don't know, I
Are
can't
they
remember.
leases or do they own them? That's what I'm trying to figure out. What is the relationship and how does this work?
Huh?
I don't have an answer.
Like we spending $254,000, right, for this property, and then, obviously Habitat for Humanity has fundraising, they get the materials, they get the contractors, they get everybody to build it. So they build it and it's worth, let's just say each unit's worth $200,000 for discussion purposes. Do they sign a deed over to these people? Now that person owns that place and like, we're done and they could sell it for a profit later on? Like they
No,
could sell for
it's-
$350,000 and it's not affordable anymore, or do they get a lease on the property? Or for some de minimis amount, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I could pull that up. It's for the prior properties that we approved last time, that all of that information was part of the backup, and I can't remember all the details, but it is deed restricted. And it is, I believe Habitat has the long-term lease. I'm not 100% positive, yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out whether whether it's affordable for the first person who gets it.
No, it's restricted.
Long-term, things like that have. Long-term restrictions.
Okay. Hopefully the deed restrictions are better than the ones we did at the Navy housing where people walked out and sold those things for market value and got
They
around
weren't
the deed restrictions.
supposed to.
I
Yeah,
know,
it was lack
know,
of
but
control.
It's not good that happened.
I think we're going back and.
So at a minimum, even if approved tonight, we can get a full write-up on that.
Okay,
Send it to the
I
board.
just like to, I just don't understand it. I think it's a great organization. I know people have done a lot of work for them. I think it's all great. I just don't understand it.
Yeah,
So I'd like to know.
I did
that-
at one point, I forgot.
Yeah, I'd like to know
no,
that the town has this
exactly.
affordable housing if we're investing in it, that it becomes that somebody's just not walking away with it, or at least understand that they are.
Yeah.
We can get the write-up.
Yeah.
I'm not
We have a
gonna-
continuing interest in them. Okay.
The
Mr.
Connecticut chapter gives Habitat for Humanity a right of refusal at a contracted price, apparently.
On this property, on
Some-
these properties.
It varies by chapter, but that's what they said, yeah.
Thank you.
We need to get
Ms.
more
Ruggiero?
information.
Yeah, we'll
Just
get a
a
write-up.
very quick question. Does this count towards like affordable housing and 830G requirements?
Yeah, this counts.
That's a lot of.
I mean, it's not a lot of, not a lot of points.
Yeah,
Like 3 units.
Yeah.
but it's trying to chip away at that, yeah,
Thank you.
and long-term, right?
Thank you. Other questions? Anyone? Okay.
And just one last question. This is the only ARPA project, right, that involves like affordable housing. Is that correct? Okay, I just want, I know we've been trying to spread this stuff out to different projects, playgrounds, but it's that good.
Yeah, and I think that was, that was one of the things when we looked at that final amount, that when this came up, that was one of the sort of benefits of it, is that we hadn't actually been able to do that, and there weren't a lot of opportunities.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so the next item, I think I finally figured out why Scott has been suffering through this entire meeting.
I thought you wanted to get ready for budget season.
I thought he was just interested, yeah, okay.
Let's see the dynamics.
You're getting ready for budget season, try to see.
Main library patio. All right, who do you?
You wanna go for that one?
I'm gonna let you handle it.
Oh, come on.
Yeah,
You waited- you waited like.
You waited all this time, you guys.
He's handling it.
You've gotta.
No one sells your stuff like
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah, exactly. I'm handling it a lot well, and then it's gonna tank on this
You're
one.
good at selling
Yeah, you're
yourself.
going for it.
So if you look at libraries across the country, many of them expanded their outdoor space with ARPA funds because that was really the trend. The staff of Fairfield Public Library have done a wonderful job of doing more outside programs, being present outside, and also if you just go down the street by the main library, there are constantly people on this patio.
Yeah.
If you came to make music day, it's a great performance space. I'd like to do our book sales there as well. So what this project really does is it just replaces furniture, expands out the patio a little bit more, creates some table seating. So in the summer, we do have issues with small children and their caregivers wanting to eat at the library. This actually expands some outdoor space
for them to be able to do that. And it gets ahead of probably some repairs that we would need to do for about 5 years to the pavers and to replace the furniture. It does remove a tree, which is kind of against my own personal feelings, but that tree is kind of a little misplaced. So that's really the only downside to this project. Really, it just expands the library space, makes it nicer, gives people an outside space to sit at, and also gives us some space to do programming outside as well.
And who will do this work? So we're contracting.
We're contracting the majority of the work.
Has
Mr.
the library received any other ARPA funding?
We did, we got funding to do outside solar charging stations.
Okay.
But that was not through the town. The state library actually received ARPA funds and
Okay.
distributed those funds that
Okay, but not through our.
Not
allotment.
through ARPA.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Sheriff?
I think it sounds wonderful. And my only question is, does this utilize all the space available, or is there space that you're not doing because you have constrictions with ARPA funds?
No, this expands the space, I think, comfortably enough to give us the ability to do what we need to do. Some of it is removing some of the shrubs and trees. And a little bit of expansion of the patio is to make sure that that table seating doesn't now encroach on that open space that we have. So we could always do more. I mean, I could have come up with a rooftop plan that would have been fantastic.
I was thinking umbrellas and stuff, but anyway,
But
sounds good.
we could have done more, but I think this is respectful of the idea of how we should spend our funds.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on this one? All right, thank you.
All that just for
All
2
right,
minutes.
Wow, thanks.
I had to ask you a question.
Okay, so the fire stations renovation design, David, I'm assuming that's you?
Yes, so this, there's backup for that as well. We have quotes to get an estimate on the work. And this would be going to construction design documents on one of the stations. And then for 4 of the stations plus the apparatus, doing design phase. So the thought process with that is one of the stations has a slot in the fiscal year 26 as of now. So this would bring a firm, ready to go out to bid type of number for that project in time for, if we do this now over the next few months, in time to make the March, February, March timeline for the waterfall adjustments and appropriation window. And then for the remaining, it gets us for a higher level estimate, and that was one of the questions that came up on the boards is how accurate are those? This would get us, to a higher reliability without going all the way out to the much more expensive and detail, full, TV ready to put package. So it's around, it's estimated at 15,000 per, for the, for the design phase, and then the balance is to go to the construction document phase for the other stuff.
And we can encumber all this by year end?
Correct.
Right, questions on this one?
I'll say, I was a little surprised to see this one on the list. I mean, what station's number 4? Did we get a tour of 4? We only saw 3 stations.
4 was the second station. We went to 1s, then 4s, then 2s.
So that's Southport. Okay.
That's the
Okay.
worst.
Correct, which is why it had been ranked as the first.
Okay. I will agree it is the first.
Definitely.
All
Probably one of the mental health funding.
Torn down and a new one to go.
History.
Cool
History.
upstairs.
History. How do you know?
We wanted to be history.
Yeah, I mean, the
Okay.
IT equipment's hanging on the wall.
I know. All right, let's keep going here.
So
Item 4.
yes, the next one is radio project on the fire department side. There was a rather substantial radio project that is at the point of completion now, and for police and fire. That network, a few things. That network was originally designed to have been not just public safety, but the entire town. So we are trying to evaluate what it will take to involve all the other departments and agencies that should have been involved in that. In that discussion, while looking at police and fire and saying, so how's the final, stages of the rollout with the equipment working out? What are your gaps or what are your successes so far? One of the issues that we've discovered is that the operational channels for the what we call the fire ground channels for the fire department don't have any repeating capability, and they for I'd say whatever reason, but it was really about how much money they were allocated and trying to make things work with what they had as the final numbers came in. They did not add repeaters on the trucks like they originally had wanted to do, and now they're trying to. So a repeater would take, so if you have say a activity on the fire ground, say on a portable, it would take that at the truck and it would send it off somewhere else. So it would repeat the message and get that message to the dispatch center or to other units that are coming inbound. So the way that the existing several decade old system works is that the non-repeated channels, they only work in a general vicinity. And their channels, their primary channel will work not just at that location, but their operational channels will only work in that vicinity still. So it's like taking, it should have been done in the first place. It's a gap that's identified. It's actually a safety gap. And when you start to look at the modernization of it, so the question was, what is it going to cost and how long is it going to take? One of the issues and just the concept of ARPA versus even coming for non-recurring in spring is that these parts take a minimum of 12 months just to order and to get in, let alone to then try to install.
Okay.
So.
Questions on this one?
Why 10? I mean, how did you come up with 10?
So that is enough to get it on all of the frontline apparatus and several of their spare apparatus. In an ideal world, it might go into several other spares, but this gets them on the spares that are used on a more regular basis. Okay. So at a minimum, they're frontline day-to-day.
Other questions on this one?
I just have a question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Just in the spirit of trying to spread the money around, and looking at the spend here for the fire and, just versus police or something, is there anything, the stations, we all toured and it's a desperate situation, but is there anything maybe for like the sidewalk or something else that could be, this money could be utilized for, rather than, giving more to one specific group?
So paving and sidewalk repair did get 5.7 million of ARPA overall throughout the program. So there, just as an example, we are looking in the final is $272,000 last year. I was looking in that final amount, where our gaps, even if they're small, maybe there's a $15,000 need that would be, something that's on the budget that would be helpful. We're looking in part, this is items that are in front of us, we don't have funding on, that there are some time sensitivities and
You said there's 270,000?
When we're done right now, there's currently 273,000 unallocated, so there will be one more pass. We're planning to go to the Board of Selectmen, either on the 20th or the following week, and come for the first week of December. And that our hope is that is going to be the last time that we come for ARPA. But we're trying.
So worst case scenario though, we want to use obviously every penny of this. The worst case scenario is we put that 272 towards paving.
That's your
right?
absolute worst case scenario.
Like you have to, every penny has to be,
Yes.
ideally, you don't want to leave money on the
No,
table.
you don't want to leave money on the table. We yes.
Okay.
And that's the worst case at that. And we are actively trying to work through with all the departments and to the point of.
Everyone's gotten it, you know, Parks and Rec, they've all gotten a chance to.
Yeah, Parks-
certainly for the years, it's been a very long process.
Exactly. I mean, Parks got, you know, there were several different playgrounds. There was the Jennings Beach concession. There was also the gate at Jennings. When we got the bonding allocation for 75 for the Lakeland Community Playground, we added 75, and therefore we got more money towards the playgrounds. So, you know, some of the more, you know, recent ones are gaps. I've tried to find public, you know, the public safety gaps and other places, but
Sounds good.
certainly others.
Yep, thank you.
All right. EV engines.
So I'll get named again on public safety, but the police department has their port security grant. So they rebuild and replace their engines on recurring, you know, generally recurring schedules. They get port security funds to assist with that. So the smaller of their two boats, the Mercury engines, are at a point where in their replacement cycle, they're going to be doing replacement. So they're going to use half of it comes from the port security grant. So the other half, our thoughts to not, you know, to be able to get that done this year in the winter time on schedule and use ARPA funds, and that just avoids hitting, you know, a budget line that didn't necessarily prepare for that. So it was a smaller item, but helpful.
Questions on this one? Okay, and the police HQ rehab, this is just additional money the bid came in higher?
Yeah, so this trues it up to an actual bid, but what I would say on that is that this money and this project and sort of the construct of that predates us and this administration, but it was brought up back in, I want to say in the April-May timeframe. They had come forward with a bonding request, and actually there was sort of a push for the board. Hey, instead of trying to piecemeal phase this and do that, we assigned a project manager. They've kind of flipped the whole thing on its head and said, wait a minute, you're gonna need temporary space. So one of the things would be, why don't we find where in those construction design documents your male and female bathrooms are going to be for that. And then let's not build a makeshift down in the basement and spend money. Let's put a bathroom and a bathroom that are the new ones. Let's put them out for bid. And now we know those are gonna permanently stay. And so the larger project is going to get, you know, finalized in the next, you know, month and a half, and then be able to come forward and come to the boards as one, we're doing the station and you know, updates, getting it done.
I'm confused. What does that have to do with this?
This is the bathroom piece and getting moving on the bathroom.
Okay, so just, okay,
Until the bathrooms are done, you're not gonna start any of the
got
project.
it, okay.
And this is just choosing up.
All right, any questions on this one? Starting to get some.
And then page 2, that's the last of the new items. Big adjustments upward. $40,000 senior center renovation. This is of course, this trues this up to an actual bid on the project to finish the work that was being done at the senior center.
Okay,
So
truing up
just
to
truing
actual
up to
bid.
the actual.
Any questions on this? All right, and were there any other changes on here?
There's some items going downward. The next 3 items are highlighted there if you want
We
to
see the
see
notes
them,
there,
but
okay.
they're all notes. And then there's a stray 511 on this police corridor that it's just the invoice was off by, you know.
That's
by-
fine.
to clean up.
All right, any questions on this schedule? Nice to have this.
I'll tell you, the fire's getting a lot of money. They're getting like $1.8 to $2 million total out of the $24 million. Almost $2 million.
Police, I believe,
Police got
$3
the
million
radio.
for the body cams.
Yeah.
Their
Oh,
roads got 5 million and food center got 850.
Well, the $3 million, okay, we gotta be honest about that. It was, we're also saving the lease price for that for 10 years, right? Right? That's what it's being used for, correct?
It's not a competition.
That way for the last, I guess.
Love them both. them both, and we love all of our departments, and police and fire do happen to be two, along with public works is the third. You know, 1, 2, and 3 of the largest budgets and head counts, and they have different elements of needs, and we support all of our departments, so.
All right, why don't we, we're gonna lose Mr. Matola in like 30 minutes, so. Is any other questions?
Turning into a pumpkin?
Yeah, I think so. Are we ready to vote on this item?
Yes.
Okay, any public comment? No public comment. Okay, so all in favor of approving the reallocation of ARPA funds set forth in item 12 and detailed in the meeting backup, please raise your hand. Okay, that is unanimous, 8-0. All right. So item 13.
270 grand left
Yes,
now.
that's what I saw on here, yeah.
Why don't we put that towards the safety streets project? And now not have to bond as much. I mean,
We'll do
Jesus.
that in our
Christ.
next meeting.
I already asked that.
Yeah, I mean, like, seriously. Let me just take that so we don't have to pay interest for the next 20 years.
Suggestion.
I'd like to see that happen. I'm just telling you that as a board member. So when that comes up, I'd like an explanation why we wouldn't do something we know we want to bond right away for stuff that we're going to be using in the next year.
So
by June 30th, actually.
We will.
All right, let's address that during the next meeting. I don't know if you're ready to have an encumbrance
Is it
by
on the
your.
study? I don't think you can.
Yeah, I think you can. Okay,
Well, it's safety
so
too.
we need to spend, I want to make, the next two items are related, item 13 and 14. Which have to do with our year-end surpluses. So item 13 is to hear, consider, and act upon a resolution approving the transfer of the fiscal 23-24 spending surplus. Resolved that the town hereby authorizes, approves, and directs the transfer of the fiscal year 23-24 spending surplus as follows. Portion of the fiscal 23-24 surplus resulting from actual expenditure amounts that were less than budgeted expenditure amounts shall be appropriated to the town's unassigned fund balance. The amount of such appropriation to unassigned fund balance may not exceed an amount that causes the overall fund balance to exceed 11.76% of the town's fiscal year 23-24 operating budget. After the appropriation of spending surplus to the unassigned fund balance, any remaining spending surplus shall be appropriated to the debt service fund. Motion to hear this item, Mr. Penley, seconded by Mr. Myers. Okay, so the backup for this item and the next item is posted online, and it's on page 191. And this will look familiar to board members because this is the schedule of our surplus that we reviewed during our last quarterly meeting. I think there might be a very slight adjustment to it based on the audit, but so there's 2 pages here. There's the projected net estimated operational variance that shows the surplus, and then another sheet that shows the fund balance and the 11.76%. So, Mr. Becker, you're going to take us through this one?
Yes, so this has been calculated to assume the 11.76, not increasing it. That seems to be the general direction in the past and our understanding. It is worded in a way that as the final numbers, drop as we complete the last piece of the audit, that it guarantees that it locks it in at that particular number. So that's why you don't see, an exact dollar, but to
Make
simply
sure we don't put
hold
too
that
much
number.
surplus.
Exactly, so it's worded accordingly. And then this is the latest, page 1 of the documents, generally, mirrors what you've seen before, some minor adjustments as we continue to firm things up, with the auditors. There's specific questions, but it's generally what you've seen before, only more finalized.
Okay, questions from the board? So I did go through this with Ms. Bossy, so I think I can. 75 plus Okay. So I can fill in if anyone has questions on this, but basically, and Mr. Becker, make sure I'm not misstating anything, but based on my discussion with Ms. Bossy, we need $2.1 million to replenish fund balance or to get fund balance, hold harmless fund balance, and keep it at 11.76% of expenditures. So
How much do we budget for that? Do we budget?
$1,225,000. So
Okay.
it's on this schedule.
Yeah.
So if you take the $1,225,000
Yep.
plus the spending surplus of $575,000, and then there were some lapsed encumbrances. So encumbrances were, POs or whatever that were canceled. And you add up those three numbers, that gives us 2.1 million.
Remember, we budgeted, but there were also draws against.
Right,
it,
so
several
just,
items, but-
yeah, I'm just trying to keep it simple. So essentially, what this does is it allocates, just based on the action of this board, that all that surplus to fund balance, so that we know fund balance is held harmless. And the next item will deal with the spending surplus separately.
So it just happens to work out perfectly?
It's very close, and then a piece of it will drop not to fund balance when they finalize. it.
Yeah, so
But the answer is it's very, very close.
Yeah, I think maybe the lapse encumbrances were a tiny bit higher, but any portion that gets to above 11.6% will go to the debt service
Yep.
fund. So, yeah. Any questions on this item?
13, no.
Okay. All right, we can vote on this then. Actually, public comment, no public comment. All right, all in favor of approving the transfer of the fiscal 23-24 spending surplus as set forth in item 13 of the agenda, please raise your hand. Okay, that's unanimous, 8-0. Okay, so we'll go to item 14. The backup is the same. To hear, consider, and act upon a resolution approving the transfer of the fiscal 23-24 revenue surplus. This also requires RTM approval. So resolved that the town hereby authorizes, approves, and directs the transfer of the fiscal 23-24 revenue surplus as follows. The portion of the 23-24 surplus resulting from actual revenue amounts that were more than budgeted revenue amounts shall be appropriated as follows. I'm not going to read every line in the agenda, but basically the reason the table is set out in the agenda that shows the details of the revenue surplus is that what we're doing with this action is we are actually increasing the budget to account for those higher revenues. So we're increasing budgeted revenue, and then we are appropriating that additional revenue and transferring it to the debt service fund. So that's how this gets handled. So actually, I should take a motion to hear this item. Ms. Ruggiero, seconded by Mr. Penley. So the backup, again, it's the same. The revenue surplus we're talking about is on the first page of that backup, and it's that 12,085,000 number. So that number would, through this action, essentially be parked in the debt service fund and utilized based on, we would have to vote on its utilization.
Board of Finance.
The Board of Finance,
Yep.
yes.
So this goes to all three, this is similar to
Yes.
this in the past, and it goes to all three boards.
Yes,
because
so
it
this
adjusts
is-
an appropriation amount.
Yes, so this is, we're actually adjusting, so unlike what we did before, so the spending surplus is dealing with a budget appropriation that we already approved as part of the budget. This is actually changing the budget, so it has to go through the same boards that approve the budget. So
And how much is in the debt service account before we put this money in? How much money's there?
8 million?
Yes, though most of that is assumed to be spoken for.
Right, but it's 8 million, and that's roughly the
roughly-
liability for the
Correct.
aggregate fill pile. Yeah.
Okay.
mean, it's not officially designated, but just as a note,
Exactly.
that's what, yeah,
But yes.
And then we'll determine what to do with it,
yes.
because we are not paying down debt from what I understand with it, right?
Well, we could apply it toward debt service in the budget and, you know, do it that way. I mean, it's up to the administration to make a proposal, but yeah.
So we've got a lot of bonding stuff coming up. It would be nice to pay cash for something. Especially on the WPCA stuff.
Yep, so this allows for the flexibility to do that and, you know, rather than making that decision now, we just, this protects this money from going into fund balance where we don't want it to go in and then take it out.
I just want to point
Yes.
out something really obvious, but it wasn't to me until I put it together, but there's nothing on this that says that this is millions. I know that's dumb.
So-
I know it says it here.
So that, so.
To here, it only says 12,000.
I was all confused.
We were doing this in sort of accountant speak and went down and pulled it. And then when you look on the schedule, you've got the $1,000,000, so it gets it off the schedule. So actually, the Board of Selectmen earlier today made a motion to add all of these and technically, because it was referred to you without it, it would be helpful if the Board of Finance makes the motion to amend it to add all of the zeros, and then when we refer to the RTM, it'll have it on it already.
No, I'm sorry.
So,
We
well,
just
how did
put-
you?
We just put millions in parentheses.
We put it
somewhere.
thousands.
Thousands rather, thousands, yeah, okay.
So you just need to insert something to.
Okay.
Thousands.
So what is the exact,
Yeah,
let's
no,
just
no.
do the same
We
thing.
put in thousands above the first number.
Okay, so details of revenue surplus thousands.
Yeah.
Similar to how on this schedule it has that, you can just,
Got it,
yeah,
okay.
so you just need to.
So,
make that motion.
okay, so I'll make a motion to amend item 14, the line that says detail of revenue surplus and insert in parentheses in thousands. Second by Ms. Ruggiero, vote on the amendment, all in favor? Okay, that's unanimous, 8-0. Okay, any further questions on the motion, on the main motion?
I just want to make sure this amount that we're putting in there into the debt service fund cannot be used by the administration to hire people that are not currently in the budget, right? We budgeted a certain amount, correct?
Yeah, we have to vote on it. Yeah, that's what that's what
But
putting,
there should be no assumption that we're gonna vote for that just because if they did do that.
We would have to propose it and you would have to
Yeah.
vote on it.
anything they want to do would have to come back before the boards, yeah.
Okay, because there's been some different positions and I understand that the administration has that ability to do that and to run it the way they want. I just want to make sure when that's being done, it's being done within the budget constraints that we have, that we gave and we voted on. That it's not being, people aren't being hired with the expectation that we're gonna fund them out of surplus.
Well, if the
Just wanna be
administration
clear
wants
about
to
that.
do that, it has to come back for a
They should
vote.
make a presentation before
Yes.
they actually do that.
Correct.
Okay.
Like if you wanted, and then I don't wanna, but if you wanted to do a reorganization that involved hiring a couple of people or whatever, and you wanted to fund the current year impact of that out of surplus, then that would have to come back for a vote.
Just like we did it before
Correct.
under the previous administration.
Okay. All right, so all in favor of approving the transfer of fiscal 23-24 revenue surplus is set forth in item, it's set forth in the amended item 14 of the agenda. Please raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, that is unanimous 8-0. All right. Almost done. All right, we'll move to item 15. To hear, consider, and approve changing the charge of the fund balance committee to include review and recommendations of policy related to fund balance and borrowing and debt service. Motion to hear this item is Ruggiero, seconded by Mr. Penley. Okay, so I think most board members know this. We had a majority of the board members at the last meeting, but just as background in case and for the public, the last week of September, we had 2 meetings to discuss capital planning. One for town projects, one for Board of Ed. As a refresher from our discussions during those sessions and also on October 1st, we left those capital planning meetings with a consensus that while a lot of important progress had been made, the plan needed reworking, principally because the sheer magnitude of the projects that were identified, which was $500 million over 10 years, would put us on a path to reach the limits of our borrowing and debt service policy. We agreed some projects likely needed to be deferred to build cushion at the plan level. We also agreed we need a policy or at least some guiding principles on how WPCA projects will be financed. Acknowledge that any changes in those WPCA assumptions could significantly impact the overall capital plan. We also acknowledge that we need to vote on some capital projects before all that work is complete, and we did some of that tonight. But before we commit to major projects or projects that are more discretionary in nature, we need an updated plan that's feasible in terms of our borrowing capacity. And on October 17th, our fund balance subcommittee did meet to begin the discussion of working on recommendations for the full board. That meeting was productive. It was attended by a number of board members in addition to the subcommittee members. Given that the work the subcommittee is doing, which I just described a minute ago, is beyond the scope of what the fund balance committee typically does, it was suggested that the full board officially vote to change the charge of the subcommittee. So that's what this item is. It's to basically officially change the charge of the subcommittee to do the work that we talked about previously and continue the work that we started on the 17th. Any questions from the board? Mr. Walsh.
And I know I'm the one who raised this at the board meeting because I was on the fund balance committee for a number of years and it had a specific charge, and now this was expanding it. So I think this is the formality of changing it. But I think if we're going to change it, I would like to make an amendment that the name of the committee be changed as well to match what the committee's doing, so that it's not people don't misunderstand what that committee is kind of charged with. So I would just like to make an amendment, I guess. Let me just see.
What do you want to name the committee?
Yeah, I just keep it simple, like name it what it's gonna do, the fund balance, borrowing and debt service committee.
Okay.
This way, it kind of says what that committee is doing.
Fund balance, borrowing.
Thanks, John.
Debt service. All right, just writing that down. Okay, seconded by Mr. Mottola. All in favor? Okay, great. That's unanimous, 8-0. Any other questions on this?
I mean, in terms of the members of this subcommittee, is
Mm-hmm.
it intended to keep it the same? Because I know that, Mary isn't here tonight, but she seemed to feel like these topics that were being presented at this subcommittee really should be going before the full board. So what would be, I mean, I guess anybody can go to a subcommittee meeting.
Yeah, I mean, normally the subcommittee just doesn't work, but on this one, my view is that anybody that wants to come from the board, come, have a seat at the table, participate as though you're on the committee. The committee doesn't have any power. The committee can only do work and recommend to this board. So this board has to vote on whatever the committee does anyway. And yeah, this was, we set the committees annually at our organizational meeting, and usually everybody wants to be on the same one or two committees, so we have to split people up. So this is where we are now. But okay, any other questions? All right, so all in favor of approving, let me. So all in favor of approving the charge of the fund balance, borrowing and debt service committee to include review and recommendations of policy related to fund balance and borrowing and debt service, please raise your hand.
And excuse me.
Yep.
And changing the name of the committee. You should add
Okay,
that.
yeah, I said the name of the.
All
I
right.
think we amended I thought we were a minute ago, kind of amending the item. So I think we're really voting on an amended item.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Change the name.
Yeah, so when I said all in favor of approving the charge, I said the new name of the committee, but
Yeah.
should I word that differently?
I mean, I guess we could just,
I think you worded it fine, just say, and amending the name of the committee to the
Okay,
fund
so
balance.
all in favor of amending the name of the Fund Balance Committee to the Fund Balance Borrowing and Debt Service Committee and approving the charge of that committee to include review and recommendations of policy related to fund balance, borrowing, and debt service. Please raise your hand, okay?
Perfect.
Great. Okay, that's unanimous 8-0, and thank you, everybody, for your input on that. Okay. I'll move to item 16 to hear, consider, and act upon the minutes of September 3rd, 17th, and 24th of 2024. Motion to hear this item, Ms. Ruggiero, seconded, Mrs. Stark. Okay, the backup is the draft minutes that begin on page 193. Anybody have any comments on those minutes? Okay, I think the same people were at all, with the exception of Mr. Myers, were at all this meeting, so we can vote on them all together. Yeah. All in favor of approving the minutes of September 3rd, 17th, and 24th, 2024, please raise your hand.
Aye.
Mr. Curley, okay, opposed, abstain. Okay, the motion passes 7-0-1. All right, item 17, to hear and consider any communications. Mr. Becker, do you have anything? Okay. All right, item 18, motion to adjourn. Ms. Ruggiero.
John might want to motion that.
Seconded by Mr. Myers. All right, good night, everybody.
Good night.